That was the inquiry from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho here on CBC Radio 1. Have a great
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team at Information Radio. Thank you so much for joining us. It is a Wednesday morning. It's 3 minutes to 6 a.m., and the show is on till 8:37 a.m. If you need us on the morning commute, 788-3093. It's going to be warmer today, but it feels blustery out there. I think the wind is whipping that light snow across the lanes, and so it feels like a good, solid winter drive, as I like to say, but take it easy. We are going to have periods of snow and local blowing snow throughout our morning with those winds gusting from the south to 50 kilometers per hour. But today's high will be 2 degrees. May McKillop's in this morning. Good morning, May. May is directing the program and also will be covering the commute on air. Good morning to Kevin Nipatebo saying hello to you on YouTube. Kevin is our YouTube producer. You can watch the show there. And Abby Adiemi, good morning to you. Abby is our technical producer and also will be covering the weather forecasts on the program. Heather Wells joins us live now, though, from our news center, and she's here with our headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Premier Wab Kinew and other provincial leaders meet today with the Prime Minister in Ottawa. At the top of the First Minister's agenda, a response to Donald Trump's threat to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian goods. Kinew says although they may differ ideologically, you know what I'm saying, all the premiers are united to safeguard Canada's interests. As for his own interests, Kinew says his top priorities are protecting Manitoban jobs and bringing down the cost of living. So we'll hear more from Wab Kinew through the morning. And the University of Winnipeg is cutting an English language program for international students and shutting down the women's soccer team for the upcoming season. The school blames international student caps imposed by the federal government. More on that as well in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
We totally know what you're saying. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
All right, let's look at what's coming up in the program today. So one of the changes is that Tessa Blakey of White Cloud is going to be leaving Salome Mission. She's been leading there, and she is going to be joining the provincial government as an advisor on homelessness to work with this plan Heather was mentioning. So she will be live with us in studio a little bit later in the morning to talk through what the plan, some of the details of the plan and also what her hopes are for this. In addition, in the first hour of the program, are you looking for ways to step out into the new year with some grounding perspective? Well, there's an event coming up that we're going to tell you all about, but that's after World Report.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Like a lot of kids who grew up in Kelowna, BC, Taylor Kitsch started out playing hockey. He was pretty good until 2 tragic injuries put the brakes on that. Since then, he's become one of the most in-demand actors in Hollywood. He'll be here to tell you his story and about his new show.
We do what we have to do.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdelmahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. One of Donald Trump's first acts in office on Monday could radically change the Canadian economy. Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is meeting with the country's premiers to prepare. They want to stop a 25% tariff from being placed on Canadian goods. And if they can't, they need to protect Canadian workers. Janice McGregor is in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, what are the premiers saying heading into this meeting?
Marcia, their chair, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, has been out for weeks saying premiers are going to take the lead on this file. But when the focus turned to the role that Canadian energy exports are going to play in a retaliation strategy to respond to Donald Trump's tariff threats, well, their common front broke down. So when Ford emerged from his meeting with Intergovernmental Affairs Minister Dominic LeBlanc yesterday at Queen's Park, he said dealing with Trump is Ottawa's problem.
They play a key role. This is their file. We're there to support them.
After earlier saying that Ottawa needed to get its act together, Ford said he actually liked the border plan that LeBlanc showed him. Provinces are contributing policing resources to help with that. But stepping up border security no longer appears to be enough, especially after Trump's latest social media blast made the motives of his incoming administration more clear. Trump's base believes they can raise tariff revenues to a level where they can eventually lower or even replace American income taxes. A return to how governments worked a century ago, and a proposal that both economists and the U.S. business community argue won't work. Populist nationalism also may be contagious. Listen to Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew as he arrived in Ottawa last night.
And hey, if the rest of the world is starting to look at onshoring and just bringing manufacturing and the actual job of building stuff back home, then that's what we should be doing too.
So how is the business community feeling about this?
Very nervous and prepared now to take things into their own hands. A coalition representing Canada's major exporters, both corporate industry and labour groups, met with Canada's ambassador in Washington last week and launched a new Canada-US Trade Council to share intelligence and coordinate their responses at a time when political leadership remains in flux. Canada's aluminum and steel industries are going to take the lead. They, more than anyone, know what it's going to take to fight a trade war.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. John Paul Tasker has more on this story at cbcnews.ca. It is one of the most read stories on our main page. Mark Carney will be launching his bid for the Liberal leadership on Thursday in Edmonton. Calgary Liberal MP George Cahal sent an invite to Alberta Liberals this morning. He says he will be supporting Carney. The former Bank of Canada governor was born in the Northwest Territories and raised in Edmonton. In Seoul.
제가 해보겠습니다. 윤석열 만세! 윤석열!
Supporters of impeached South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol protesting in the streets. Yoon was taken into custody earlier this morning. The arrest follows a long-standing standoff between police and Yoon's security at the presidential compound. Yoon is under investigation over his failed martial law declaration a month ago. Patrick Falk has more.
The operation to arrest President Yoon Suk-yeol got underway early this morning in Seoul. This was the second attempt to bring him in following a botched effort just over a week ago. Supporters of the president like Kim Woo-ki have been camped outside Yoon's official residence for days, braving icy conditions.
If the president were to be arrested, all of us here, the people of this country, will be prepared to stop the arrest at all costs.
As dawn broke, police breached the walls of the presidential compound. More than 1,000 officers were on hand in an operation designed to overwhelm the Presidential Security Service, who've been protecting Yoon from arrest. Reports say there were tense negotiations with the president's legal team. Later, a motorcade carrying the president was seen leaving the compound. In a video statement, Yoon described the execution of the arrest warrant against him as deplorable.
I decided to respond to the investigation, despite it being an illegal investigation, to prevent bloodshed. However, that doesn't mean I acknowledge the investigation.
South Korea's Corruption Investigation Office has 48 hours to question Yoon. It then needs to decide whether to request a warrant to detain him. Patrick Falk for CBC News, Seoul.
Multiple regions across Ukraine are without power. The state energy company had to make power cuts after a huge Russian attack overnight. 70 drones and 40 missiles were launched at Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says the military shot down most of those missiles. People in Kiev once again took shelter in subway stations. Gas plants and other energy infrastructure were targeted in this attack. Without power, Ukrainians are in darkness during some very long and cold winter months. People in Los Angeles are eager to return to their homes and survey the damage done to their neighborhoods. But first, it has to be safe to go back, and the wind has to slow down. That's not expected to happen before noon today. Freelance reporter Steve Futterman is in Los Angeles with the latest. And Steve, how strong have the winds been overnight?
Marcia, they've been strong, but not as strong as we expected. Earlier in the week, the National Weather Service was saying you could expect gusts up to maybe 112 kilometers an hour. They have lowered those expectations. We may have gusts that are high, but only about 80 kilometers an hour. And to compare that to last week, the gusts reached 160 kilometers an hour. So the winds are much less than last week and much less than they expected. And LA is still a bit cautious, nervous, but maybe they're going to get through this PDS, particularly dangerous situation. That's an actual term used by the National Weather Service, expected to last for another, 10 to 12 hours.
If Los Angeles gets through today, is there better weather ahead?
Absolutely. The National Weather Service says that starting tomorrow, more moisture is going to be in the air. The winds are going to be much, much less, reasonable winds, and the relative humidity is going to go up. So these are three things that will definitely help firefighters. The Weather Service says if LA, Southern California gets by today, it's in relatively good shape.
Some people, though, are still afraid for their homes and are still looking for private firefighters. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it's an economic thing. If you have a lot of money, you can hire private firefighters. And in fact, we've seen situations here in Pacific Palisades where private firefighters were hired and they were able to protect some homes and some businesses. It's very, very expensive. But if you have disposable income, if you have enough of it, you can put your money into that. And you often it does work.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Marcia.
Steve Futterman reporting from Los Angeles. Joe Biden is preparing to say goodbye to Americans. The 46th president of the United States will deliver his final speech from the Oval Office tonight. In just 5 days, he will hand over power to Donald Trump. This morning, Biden released a letter to the American people. The CBC's Chris Reyes joins me now from New York with more. And Chris, what does it say?
So President Joe Biden opens the letter by bringing Americans back to the moment when he was elected, called on to restore America's soul after a pandemic, an economic crisis, and a tumultuous Trump presidency. A lot of what's in this letter is what we'll hear tonight. Biden touts his legislative record, like signing the first major gun safety law in 30 years and lowering prescription drugs for seniors. He also boasted about the economy and how wages and the number of new jobs are up and the economy is down. But where you really hear Biden's voice, the one that Americans have come to know, is in the wistful last paragraphs when he describes his humble beginnings as a kid with a stutter from a small town. Biden writes, "I have given my heart and soul to our nation, and I have been blessed a million times in return with the love and support of the American people."
What kind of legacy is he leaving?
You know, it's quite obvious with this farewell week, Marcia, that President Biden is trying very hard to make sure that his legacy is protected and that it's in his own words. This caps a political career spanning more than 50 years. For Biden and his supporters, his legacy will be about that lifetime of service. Now, the bigger question is whether Biden's final words will resonate with Americans, some of whom blame him for inflation, for two raging wars. You know, many Americans feel poorer and more polarized than ever before. Many of them don't believe that Biden's promises ever materialized. And not only that, some feel betrayed that while he ran as a transitional president, he made no effort to actually pass the baton in a timely fashion.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
The CBC's Chris Reyes in New York. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. More news at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg. The wind is blowing, some light snow, and we have a mild day ahead compared to what we've had. Thanks for joining us here on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube this morning. Well, we'll get into the forecast and news headlines momentarily. Right now, let's talk about what's coming up on the program. After 15 months of war, it seems a ceasefire in Gaza and the release of Israeli hostages is imminent. We are going to run down the latest and build on what you've heard on World Report this morning. Also, we have our medical column this hour. Dr. Bardwaj is going to be talking about all of the things that are ailing people right now and what the flu and RSV and other infections look like right now across Canada. But we begin with help if you're looking for ways to figure out how to step into this new year with some grounding perspective. There's an event called Neuro Art that's happening in a cafe in Winnipeg's Bridgewater neighborhood, and we're going to hear all about it. Stay tuned. Right now, though, as I mentioned, Heather Wells is here live as well this morning, and she's here with what is developing in our news in Manitoba.
Good morning. Well, a national Muslim advocacy group wants an apology from one of the candidates vying to lead Manitoba's Progressive Conservative Party. The National Council of Canadian Muslims says it is dismayed. Wally Dowdrich's campaign shared a Facebook post ending with the statement, "We must stop Muslim Abi Khan from becoming Conservative leader." The council says that is unacceptable. Manitoba's plan to end homelessness is being criticized for not including enough social housing. The plan calls for the gradual decommissioning of homeless encampments and moving those people into housing, spaces to be freed up by convincing some better off Manitoba housing tenants to move into the private market with rent supports. We're going to hear from a University of Winnipeg professor who says she doesn't want to see vulnerable people shuffled out of social housing to make room for others. I'll be back with more news coming up at 6:30.
Before you go, Heather, I got to say, you were bouncing into the newsroom talking about a lot of Manitoba Jets fans in Manitoba that might be missing hats this morning. What a game, right?
I know, what a crazy game. You know what? And it all happened in just over 6.5 minutes. I think it was 6 minutes and 38 seconds in the first period. And it was boom, boom, boom. Kyle Connor with a hat trick. Incredible.
So awesome game. If you want to find highlights, you're going to find those, of course, online this morning, but we'll hear more about it in sports in the next hour of the show. Heather, in our news center, Scott Reguer is with sports. He'll be coming up in an hour from now. All right, let's get to what else is happening here. So weather is next. Abby Adiemi, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, but I got to say, I know that it's warm today, temperature-wise, but I got to be careful not to make too much of it because the wind's going to kind of put it, make it still feel chilly.
Yeah, we're starting with gusty winds this morning, though that should ease off as we get into the day, and then we'll see breezy conditions in most areas. Temperatures would slowly rise to above freezing sometime during your lunch break. You should start noticing that from 0 to +2. But looking at current conditions in Winnipeg and surrounding areas, we're seeing temperatures around -11 at this time. Light snow grains falling. You will notice it as you step outside. This snow and blowing snow should clear as we get into the morning, leaving behind a mix of sun and clouds for the day. It will get windy, becoming, more windy as you get close to the mid-morning period, and then our highs would get to around +2. However, it's going to feel much colder this morning with the wind chill still around -25, so you want to prepare for that. And in other regions, we're still seeing this frosty start with snow, windy conditions, drifting snow, partly cloudy conditions in most of the regions, but the north is colder this morning. But for today, we're going to see a mix of sun and clouds, and we're going to get above freezing in most of the regions down south. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at -11, snow grains falling.
So hide if you washed your car, if you wear suede.
Yeah, true.
Let's get into what's going on in the actual commute this morning. Anything to report yet, May McKillop?
Nothing big to report, but just with that snow and the bit of wind that Abby just mentioned, we're seeing some slippery conditions on the road and some reduced visibility due to the blowing snow. So northwest, if you're heading northeast outside of Winnipeg towards Gimli, Lac du Bonny, all the way up to Barron River, we're seeing lots of snow-covered, slippery conditions. I can see that the snowplows are currently moving along Highway number 9 through Matlock, and it's similar southwest out of Winnipeg through Starbuck, Carman region. Again, snow-covered conditions and reduced visibility. And when I look north of the province, it's same there. So I'm going to keep an eye on the highways throughout the show, and as well the commute here in Winnipeg. So if you're seeing anything going on in your commute and you want to let your fellow listeners know, give us a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, up first on the show this morning, you've likely heard of paint nights. You've maybe even been to one. We're going to talk about a similar event that's happening in Winnipeg's Bridgewater neighborhood. It's called the Neuro Art Cafe, and the goal is to create art to help focus on some of life's difficulties. So Irina Gordon runs the Neuro Art Cafe and is a certified therapeutic art practitioner and is with us via Zoom this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. It's nice to be here.
It's nice to have you. How do you describe to people that don't know what this is, what neuro art is?
The neuro art, we also call it neurographic art. This is the type of art that branched out of the method called neurographica. And Neurographica, it's not an art method. This is the coaching method. This is a psychological method that helps people to overcome the difficulties in their life, and it helps people to become their own coaches and therapists. So I'm also a certified Neurographic instructor. So I'm teaching the course of Neurographica, how to become the coach and the therapist for yourself. The Neuro Art Cafe is a project that I'm running currently the second time. The first time it was during the summer, and it's called Summer Neuro Art Cafe, and now is the Winter Neuro Art Cafe. So this is the meetings that I organize, and we meet at Bridgewater's Good Earth Coffee House. So it's a small group, it's a very nice environment there, and we just practice this neurographic art. I call it guided meditative art practices. So it helps you to focus, to be mindful, and just to experience this beautiful art process.
Can I interject?
I'm sorry that you're listening.
Can I interject for a moment? I can't help but interject because behind you, and the show's on YouTube, so people that watch the some listen to the show, some watch and listen, they will see a whole bunch of different examples of art. Are some of those colorful paintings, and one looks like it has hands, and maybe another one is an infinity symbol from what I can see, bright colors. Are those examples of neuro art?
Yes, correctly. You just interrupted me when I wanted to talk about it.
Perfect.
Yes. These are the examples that you can see, the examples of neurographic art. That's what we do usually. Yes.
And were those done by clients in past sessions, or have you personally connected to neuro art? Tell me a bit about why you took this approach in your therapy practice, because it is a bit of a personal journey for you too, right?
Oh, yes, certainly. So as many people, I faced the middle crisis period in my life. It happens to many people, I know that. And that's where I met Neurographica, and it helped me to overcome this. It took a time, but it was a very good help for myself. So I realized how powerful this method is. So I decided to teach it to other people and to share with other people. And if I can mention, I have an open Facebook group. It's a public group. Everyone can access this group and join. It's called Neuro Club for Neurographica and art lovers. And currently we have more than 40,000 people from around the world in this group that share their works there. So if you're interested to see the diversity of neurographic art, I invite you to join this group and just to browse and get inspirations there.
What will you be creating on Friday? What art project are you working on?
This session will be the second one. The project consists of 4 sessions in total. So the second one will be dedicated to creating a protective amulet. So we're going to draw a well-known symbol that is known as a strong protective symbol in many different cultures and religions. So I cannot reveal it right now because it's supposed to be a surprise for the participants, but that would be the theme of our next meeting.
What's it like when you sit with people and they, while they're there and they want to participate, they might also be a little bit hesitant. They might feel like, well, I'm not a good artist, or else maybe they're worried that they won't be able to understand how to participate to help this be therapeutic for them. How do you encourage people?
Well, I usually advertise on Facebook and social media, Instagram, everywhere. They can also access my website. My website is mcagordon.ca. MCA stands for Natural, Creative, Active, because these are the 3 words that define what gives us happiness in general when you think about it. So natural, creative, active. MCA Gordon. They can access this website and browse there and contact me from there so I can give them more information about neurographic art and my practice in general.
Thank you very much for being with us this morning. I know it's early, so we appreciate having you with us via Zoom.
Thank you, Marcy. Thank you. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to share with people.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
That is Irina Gordon. She runs the Neuro Art Cafe. It's and is a certified therapeutic art practitioner. So their next cafe is on Friday, 6:30 to 9 p.m. at Good Earth Coffee House on Northtown Road in Bridgewater. So that's 350 Northtown Road. But as she mentioned, if you want to register, you want to read more about this, you can go to ncagordon.ca.
The cold of winter melted by an array of floral artistry to warm your soul. Fleur de Ville Artiste comes to the Leaf at Assiniboine Park January 16th to 26th. Bedazzled by figurines decorated in flowery fashions, designed by Manitoba's vibrant art scene and blossoming floral talent. Fleur de Ville Artiste, proudly sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
6:21 a.m. is the time right now on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app or YouTube. Thanks for being with us. I'm Marcy Marcusa, wherever you're joining us. Appreciate having you along and making us part of your Wednesday morning. It's -11 in Winnipeg. Winds are southwest at 50, blowing the snow around out there. And next on the program, let's turn our attention to international news. After 15 months of war in the Middle East, a ceasefire could be rather imminent. A deal for a ceasefire in Gaza and the release of Israeli hostages, as you may have been hearing on the news, is, quote, right on the brink. And it's closer than it's ever been before. That's also a quote. Those are according to U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken as negotiations are ongoing. Those are his quotes. For the latest this morning, we have reached Arnon Levine. He's a political scientist at the University of Toronto. Good morning to you.
Good morning. It's Renan.
Oh, pardon me.
My name is Renan Levine. Marcy, it's a pleasure to talk to you. This
Pleasure
is, I
to
think,
talk
a
to you
very
as well.
optimistic day that even though I woke up with my alarm and hoped that the news were that the deal would be official, we're not quite there yet.
So optimistic is your word for the start. Not quite there yet. Why? Can you tell us a bit more about what's in the deal and what what is still sticking?
Right. Well, we don't know exactly what is still sticking. It's not. What we know is that both sides have agreed in principle to a staged peace agreement. So it will go in phases. And so as soon as the agreement is announced, the first phase will begin. And the beginning of the release of 33 Israeli hostages, women, children, and those that are seen as being most at risk or vulnerable of not being able to survive to the second phase of the agreement will begin to be released, whether they're alive or not. So one of the last stumbling blocks that had to be dealt with was that Israel was insisting that they had to know whether or not these 33 were alive or dead. And they dropped that demand, and instead they're essentially treating those hostages, whether alive or dead, equally. And in exchange, Israel will release over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, all of whom have been in jail since before October 7th. And then they'll allow in some additional humanitarian aid. And then the key part is that after 16 days, if all that goes well, then they will start talking about the details of what will happen after the war.
So you talked a bit about the Israeli hostages who will be freed and some of the sticking points. What about the Palestinian prisoners? What do we understand about that?
Well, we don't have the full list. Obviously, it's a lengthy one, but it'll be at least 1,000, maybe 1,300, some of whom have been convicted of murder, and some of those will not be released to West Bank or Gaza, but instead are expected to be sent to a third country in order to make this agreement happen. So this agreement is designed to have a lot of incentives for both sides to stick to the agreement, rather than having it, of course, fall apart. Hamas's big concern is if they release the last of the hostages, then Israel can say, okay, we've got our hostages, and we are going to come in without restraint because we don't need to worry about accidentally hurting our own people. And so the agreement is designed to make sure that both sides have an incentive to continue to adhere to the agreement, and it's not clear whether or not the details of what will happen have been at least agreed to in principle, or whether or not, indeed, after 2 weeks, they're really going to need to start fleshing out the big, important dilemmas of what will happen after the war.
And one of the, obviously, what will happen to Gaza and the people there. What's your sense of that?
Well, I think initially there's not going to be a lot of change because it appears that most, if not all, of the Israeli troop withdrawals won't happen until the second phase of the agreement, so after about 6 weeks. That said, part of the initial agreement will involve some ability for Gazans currently in the southern part of the Gaza Strip to return to their homes in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, where they're currently not allowed to go to. And so this is part of the phasing and the restoration of some degree of normalcy that if it works and if it holds, we'll see the release of the last hostages in about 2 months' time.
What role did U.S. President Joe Biden play in the process, in your view?
Well, Biden and his team, right, led by Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, have really been involved in this for months, really since the beginning of the war, but really in earnest for about the last 7-8 months of this phase. A lot of observers have been noting that this agreement looks really similar to what was put on the table this past summer. What has changed, though, of course, is not so much what's in the agreement, although obviously a few little details had to be tweaked, but what has changed is the rest of the world. That since this past summer, Israel defeated Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Assad regime fell in Syria, and Iran has been facing a lot of problems. And so that has left Hamas increasingly isolated and on its own and buoyed the popularity of Prime Minister Netanyahu. And that seems to have allowed him a bit more flexibility to make some compromises that he might not have agreed to when his popularity was at its nadir.
We'll leave it there this morning. Thank you very much for your time. We'll see what develops
My
next,
pleasure.
obviously.
Hopefully this is going to be a great day.
Appreciate having you with us.
Bye-bye.
Serena Levine, professor of political science at the University of Toronto, using the word optimistic for what he's feeling today as we await what's going to be happening next. We understand with our reporting, and as you may have heard in national and international news, that after 15 months of war in the Middle East, a ceasefire could be imminent. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. Thanks for joining us this morning on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. We've got business news coming up. If you're a regular listener, then you know Chrisley Ramlakan's going to be joining us. She's talking today about why insurance companies are warning about rates possibly going up, and also why Elon Musk is being sued. So we're going to hear those stories coming up on World Report. Just a quick reminder that Communities in Focus is about to kick off again for the next 2 weeks. CBC Manitoba is going to have presence on campus at the University of Manitoba. You might recall that CBC Manitoba had office hours and events and panels and live shows at Red River Polytech, and now we'll do something similar over at U of M. So you want to check it out starting next Monday morning, January 20th at the University of Manitoba for Communities in Focus. And if you go to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba, and you go under the community panel tab and drop down menu, you can find a list of all the different events that we are planning, including, as I mentioned, a number of different discussions. And we hope if you're listening and you're a student or you go to U of M or you're a professor or you're on campus for some other reason, that you might come and be joining us at our various different things that are going to be happening there over the next few weeks. And as I said, I use the word broadcast and stories, but really the purpose of Communities in Focus is to listen and to be where you are. And in this case, it is U of M. Right now, it's time for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. It's 6:30. Are you ready for a fast warm-up? We've warmed up 2 degrees in the past hour. Now minus 11 in Winnipeg. And it is going to be windy, south 30 gusting to 50 this morning. Our high today, 2 degrees. A housing advocate says Manitoba's plan to end homelessness may force some people out of their homes. The plan, unveiled yesterday, calls for people to be moved from homeless encampments into social housing. Spaces would be freed up by convincing better off Manitoba housing tenants to move into the private market with rent supports. Professor Shauna McKinnon works in the Department of Urban and Inner City Studies at the University of Winnipeg.
Now, we're talking about people who are in public housing that they're suggesting may not need all the support, so we're going to move them out. Have we talked to these people whether or not they'd like to move out? They're people's homes. So I don't know. I find it really problematic, and it seems like a lot more work needs to be done to focus on the issue.
The council's Tariff Ahmed says it is unacceptable.
As a provincial leadership candidate, it's incumbent upon any individual to ensure that they have carefully scrutinized anything that they are choosing to repost.
Dowdrich's campaign says the repost was only up for 4 days. Khan says he is hurt and wants Dowdrich to take responsibility. The PC Leadership Election Committee says Dowdrich must commit to making the party open to all religions. People in Dominion City, south of Winnipeg, are shocked after someone was shot and killed by RCMP. It happened yesterday in the town of about 300 people. Police say an officer shot a 33-year-old man who was armed with a metal object and refused to drop it. Dave Carlson is the Reeve in the Arm of Franklin, which includes Dominion City.
It's very unfortunate. I think everyone's shocked and somewhat distressed by it. Definitely something you don't want to see, especially in a community the size of Dominion City. It's not very big, and they say most people know each other, and it's just not a good scene.
Carlson says he doesn't recall a shooting ever in the community. Manitoba's police watchdog is investigating. Premier Wab Kinew and other provincial leaders meet today with the Prime Minister in Ottawa. At the top of the First Minister's agenda, the response to Donald Trump's threat to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian goods. Kinew says, though they may differ ideologically, all the premiers are united in safeguarding Canadian interests.
The premiers of the provinces and territories are united when it comes to standing up for our jobs and natural resources. It's also really a big priority for us to have that 2% military spending target hit.
Heading into the meeting, Kinew says his top priorities are protecting Manitoba jobs and bringing down the cost of living. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. The University of Winnipeg is cutting an English language program for international students. It's also shutting down the women's soccer team for the upcoming season. The school made the announcement yesterday due to what it calls significant financial challenges. It blames international student caps imposed by Ottawa for enrollment dropping in the English program. Tamira Khaliva is president of the U of W Students Association.
This program was, I guess, a way for students to integrate in an English society and to learn English language via this integration. So I think that was very useful for people who want to learn English very well.
The school says the Westmen women's soccer team will not return for the 2025 season. The university says it will work with affected student athletes to support them during the change. Well, the Hats were raining down on the ice at Canada Life Centre last night.
Here's a chance, and Connor scores! Here's Connor scores! To Connor, looking for the hat-trick, right in, score!
Just love that. I could listen to that all day. Kyle Connor, hat trick in the first period on TSN. The Winnipeg Jets had the home crowd cheering as they hammered the Vancouver Canucks 6-1. Connor's 3 goals all came in a span of 6 minutes and 38 seconds. That's the third fastest in franchise history. After the game, Connor says things just clicked.
The bounces just seem to be going the right way, especially early. And, we've had those nights where, the other night we're hitting posts and, they're not going your way.
Connor Hellebuck made 23 saves for his league-leading 27th win of the season. The Jets' homestand continues now, hosting Seattle tomorrow night. You can see more on last night's game, as well as other Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, good times. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Lots of smiling Jets fans this morning. It is 25 minutes to 7 o'clock, and you're on Information Radio on CBC. My name is Marcy Marcusa, and Abby Adeyemi is the name of the wonderful wonderful human being that does our weather on the show. How you doing today?
I'm good. Windy day across the province. We're going to see snow clearing in the southern part, but more snow expected farther north, and temperatures will remain chilly, but the wind chill is going to make it feel colder in some regions. For Winnipeg and surrounding areas, we're seeing temperatures at this time around -11. Light snow outside. That should taper off this morning, leading to sunny breaks in the afternoon. Expect windy conditions as mentioned. We'll see highs of -2 for Winnipeg and regions around, but the wind chill makes it feel much colder this morning. And if we look at similar conditions in the Pembina Valley region, with current temperatures around -7 in Morden, also we'll see temperatures warming up to +2 for that region. Heading west to Brandon, it is -7 at this time with drifting snow, a mix of sun and clouds in the forecast, along with windy northwest winds. The high would get to +1 for folks in Brandon today. But for tonight, we see more clear skies and then temperatures drop to around -12. In the Parkland region, we're tracking temperatures around -13 at this time in Dauphin. Expect a mix of sun and clouds with local blowing snow this morning, so that might impact your commute. The winds will be light and breezy, but your highs will be around -4. In the Interlake region, we're looking at temperatures around -11. Light snow also in that part of the province. That should clear by midday, then you see highs of +2. Windy conditions turning lighter later in the day. Moving north, we're seeing temperatures around -1 in the Parkland floor and areas around that region. We see more clouds crawl in this morning. Light snow will develop in the afternoon. The winds will be breezy, and then we'll see highs around 0. Further north, we're looking at -8 in Thompson at this time. Light snow falling in that part of the province. High will get to -1. And for Churchill, we're seeing temperatures around -12 with light snow and blowing snow in the forecast for this afternoon. We should see accumulations, a snow accumulation of around 2 to 4 centimeters for Churchill, and then temperatures will drop to around -14 later. In summary, just expect snow to clear later today in most parts of the southern regions, and highs will be between, +1, +2, +4.
It's interesting, Abby, because yesterday we asked why people love the cold to try to go positive. Yesterday we had that really, really cold day. And we have 173 comments on our Facebook page. So it just kind of took off. So I just mentioning that this morning as our weather shifts a little bit, even though the wind's making it cold. But people can check it out and you can still weigh in if you'd like to. My page, Marcy Marcusa, acts as a show page during the show. And if you ever go online to any of Abby's streams, by the way, especially Instagram, Abby's you'll be reading discussions on my pages and you'll be looking at visuals on Abby's because he takes his drone out and shoots all kinds of cool video.
I gotta hop in here because doesn't Abby just have the best videos on his channel? Beautiful stuff, Abby. Really beautiful stuff.
Thank you. I just try to, with the drone, your eyes in the sky.
And then there's always uplifting quotes and nice things too.
I know. You want to be friends with Abby. That is May McKillop, who is here to talk about what is going on in our morning commute.
So as Abby said, we're looking at some blowing conditions, blowing snow and some slippery conditions because of that. Particularly northeast outside of Winnipeg, we're seeing quite a few highways that are partially covered in snow and some reduced visibility due to that blowing snow with the wind. Similarly, if we look southwest outside of the city, kind of all the way to Brandon, a lot of reduced visibility in the southwestern side of the province. And as well, the classic spots, if we go through Riding Mountain on Highway 10, we're seeing some reduced visibility and mainly just partly covered conditions. But I can see that the snowplows are making their way along these highways. So if you're out there and you want to give us an update, or if you're listening and you're in the city of Winnipeg or Brandon and you want to give us an update on what the commute is looking like, give me a call and I will pass that message on, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, May.
You're welcome.
Let's go to business news now. Crystalie Ramlakan's here. That means it's 6:40 a.m. Sometimes people set the clocks, Crystalie, by what they hear on the show.
Oh, yeah? Do you think that people are waking up to my voice on the business report?
They may be waking up to your voice. Do you ever get those jokes where people say, "Ooh, you're in bed with me"?
Oh my goodness. No, but I have heard that people say they set their alarm for around this time, that they wake up to me talking. I'm like, all right, well, I hope that's pleasant for you.
and the "you're in bed with me" jokes are purely innocent, by the way, but people are like, "Oh, I hear you." Yeah. Okay, let's talk about insurance companies. They are now warning that rates could possibly go up.
Yeah, so that's after severe weather did record damage last year. So the cost of insured damage was more than $8 billion here in Canada. And the previous record was $6.2 billion in 2016 when wildfires tore through Fort McMurray, Alberta. So the Insurance Bureau of Canada says that last summer was the most destructive season in Canadian history. We saw $3 billion in damages from a storm in Calgary where hailstones as big as golf balls hammered the airport, damaging aircraft and forcing airlines to ground planes. The remnants of Hurricane Debbie did $2.7 billion in insured damage as 500,000 residents in Quebec had their power knocked out. And the Jasper wildfire caused just over $1 billion in damage. So insurance companies are now looking at how to make up for those losses, of course. So here's Alana Scotchmer, who is an insurance lawyer and a partner at Gowling WLG in Toronto.
So if the losses are increasing and the premiums are staying the same, that's a problem for the insurer's bottom line. So that leads the underwriters to take another look at how these products are priced, and likely the prices will go up.
So the Insurance Bureau of Canada is calling on government to be more proactive in investing in flood defensive infrastructure, ensuring homes are not built on floodplains or in wildfire zones, and making other changes to protect people and their homes from extreme weather events, which experts say are now the new normal.
Next on Business News this morning, why is Elon Musk being sued?
So the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission is suing him for allegedly failing to properly disclose ownership of Twitter shares as required by federal law, which allowed him to buy shares at artificially low prices. So before he closed his $44 billion deal to buy Twitter in October of 2022, Musk began to acquire a significant number of shares. And by mid-March of 2022, he owned more than 5% of the company's common stock. And he was required to disclose that within 10 days, but the SEC says he failed to do that on time. So the suit says had Musk disclosed his ownership, the stock price would have likely increased significantly. And the complaint says Musk underpaid Twitter investors by more than $150 million for purchases around that time. Now, Musk's lawyer says he has done nothing wrong. He added that the SEC's multi-year campaign of harassment has culminated in this filing of a single count complaint, an offense that carries a nominal penalty. And the lawsuit is one of the last under the SEC chair, who is stepping down this month following President-elect Donald Trump's vow to fire him. It's unclear if the incoming SEC head will pursue this lawsuit. Also, of course, we know Musk is a major supporter of Trump and is taking a front-facing role in the administration.
Yeah, next week's going to be really interesting. Mm-hmm. And why does Spain want to crack down on Airbnbs?
Well, Spain's prime minister is pushing for action to try to ease the country's housing crunch, including a tax of up to 100% on property purchased by non-European Union buyers. So the PM says there are too many Airbnbs as he put forward these new measures to try to help renters and house hunters in the country. Spain, of course, is one of the world's leading tourism destinations. And in 2023, non-residents from outside of the European Union bought around 27,000 homes and apartments in Spain. And the prime minister says with the housing scarcity, the government can't allow this. So the tax would be much higher, of course, than the current levies in Spain. But some people are skeptical about the plan because it lacks details about how it would be implemented. And some say the kind of property that is bought by non-EU nationals is very different than the type of housing the country needs to solve the housing crisis.
Let's get to markets this morning.
So in Europe, markets are edging higher. Germany, the UK, and France are all up. In Asia, markets are mostly on the rise, but right now, Japan and Shanghai are both still down. Hong Kong is up. Oil is up 35 cents to $77.85 US per barrel. Gold is up at $7.50 to $2,685.30 US per ounce. And the dollar is slightly up 0.01 of a cent to 69.7 cents US.
All right, thanks, Crystal.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
Crystal Ramlicam with our business news. And I just want to mention, because she was talking about the housing crisis, of course it was in Spain, but this morning we're going to be hearing more in the news about the province unveiling its new strategy to end homelessness. How does housing factor into that? Of course, in a big way, the social housing units. And later on the program, we're going to have a full interview all about it. So stay with us. This is CBC's Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Minus 11 with snow grains, a little bit of wind out there. Well, more than a little. Winds are southwest at 50 as you get through your Wednesday morning.
You think your days are uneventful. No one ever thinks about you. She goes her own way. She goes her own way. You think your days are ordinary. No one ever thinks about you. We're all the same. But you can hardly breathe without you. She says she has no time for you now. She says she has no time. Think about the lonely people. Or think about the day she found you. Or lie to yourself. See it all dissolve around you. She says she has no time for you now. She says she has no time.
What's the name of this tune? She Has No Time. Dan Mangan. This is his version of UK band Keen's tune, originally from their 2004 album called Hopes and Fears. Well, next on the show, it's time for the medical column. And as winter deepens, patients with a complex mix of respiratory illnesses are being seen in hospitals and clinics. Infections that affect your lungs, your throat. We're talking influenza, RSV, and COVID-19. Dr. Raj Bhardwaj is here with the latest.
Good morning, Marcy.
So in Canada, what is the situation with cold and flu season so far?
So the feds update their respiratory surveillance report every week, and the latest update includes data up to January 4th. So they report on things like the percentage of tests for respiratory infections that come back positive for any specific virus. And it's really important with that stat that we don't swab everyone who has symptoms, right? We only swab a small subset of people based on criteria like how likely are they to qualify or even benefit from specific anti-COVID or anti-flu meds, or do they live in a nursing home, where outbreaks need to be tracked, things like that. So looking at the national data, the percentage of tests that are positive for viruses, they're all sitting at around 10% for the big three. So for influenza, that's leading the pack with about 11.3% of tests coming back positive for influenza, and it's trending up. Next is RSV, 10.7% positive, and then COVID, 9.2% positive. Both of those are pretty stable right now. And then there are, a handful of other viruses that come back on these swabs as well. So viruses that cause colds, like enterovirus and rhinovirus, they're sitting about 7.1% positive nationwide and trending down. And then other cold viruses like non-COVID coronaviruses, adenoviruses, they're all sitting around 2-3%. But the trend is pretty clear. If we swabbed you because you were sick before Christmas, there was pretty much even chances that your swab was going to come back either COVID, enterorhino, or RSV. But since Christmas, influenza has taken the lead over all of them. So overall, we're still seeing a bunch of different viruses, but, we're starting to see that COVID is around, RSV is around, influenza is really trending up.
And I know that here in Winnipeg, the Children's Hospital, this is a report that we had at CBC from January 3rd, had started to talk about RSV and flu cases specific to that hospital that are up month over month and expected to keep climbing. So as you're alluding to, we're looking at trends here. What are you seeing at work? Are a lot of people suffering from flu-like illnesses in the workspaces?
Yeah, quite a bit. We're seeing people come into the doctor with sort of one of three scenarios, right? So the first scenario is that people who come in to get checked out because they feel quite poorly, fever and shaking, shivering, chills and body aches and, feeling quite weak to the point where if they live on their own, they're having a hard time caring for themselves. Those people often have influenza. It generally hits abruptly. It hits pretty hard, especially for older folks and unimmunized people. And then the second scenario is that there's people coming in with, they're not that sick, but they've been sick for a couple of weeks and they've sort of stalled out in terms of their recovery. So they're wondering, what's going on? Is there anything I can do to make myself feel better because these cold medicines aren't working or whatever? And, do I need a chest x-ray? Things like that. They often have lingering symptoms of some virus. And it's really hard to tell at that point which one, because if we swab them that late into their illness, a lot of times their body has killed the virus, so the swab comes back clean. Yeah, even though they're in that sort of state, the cleanup stage of their recovery, which is why they're still, coughing and feeling tired. And then the third common scenario is people were quite sick and then they were getting better and then they got sicker again. Often with more of a cough, maybe a return of their fever, things like that. Historically, we've always been taught, well, that's often a secondary bacterial infection after a viral infection. And that's still a possibility, absolutely. I've seen that. But it also could be something like COVID, because COVID can sometimes have a remitting, relapsing kind of thing where it kind of gets better and then gets worse again. So, hard to tell if it's, a second virus, a second bacteria, the same virus. But we're seeing a lot of it these days.
And when it comes to influenza, what strains are going around and how are the flu shots matching up?
Yeah, so remember there's two general types of influenza. There's influenza A and influenza B. Influenza A typically hits earlier in the season, like December through February kind of thing. And then B usually shows up later, like February, March, April kind of thing. And so far, that's the trend that we're seeing around the country. So right now on those swabs, between 93 and 98% of influenza is being caused by influenza A right now. A little bit lower in the younger kids. It's influenza B is maybe 10% of cases in kids between 5 and 19 years old. So the sort of not toddlers, but the kids. And then of the influenza A that has been sequenced, it's about 60% H1N1, which usually causes more severe illness, and 40% H3N2. In the Southern Hemisphere, in their flu season, their data showed that the vaccine reduced the risk of being hospitalized by about 35% for high-risk groups. The problem is that, when we try to look at stats in the middle of our season, it's incredibly hard to do so. We can only really do it through the retrospectoscope. So it's too early to tell how effective the vaccine is going to be for us, but it's probably, if I had to guess, it would probably be around that, around 40% in terms of keeping people out of hospital, which is pretty good. I mean, cutting your chances almost in half.
I'm stealing that word, retrospectoscope. Such a good word. As a number of the infections trend upwards, Dr. Bardwaj, flu, RSV, and COVID, all the ones you've been discussing here. What's your reminder just to people for how to stay healthy and prevent infection?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll see lots of messaging talking about hand hygiene, if you haven't already. But I think it's also, it's obviously time to think of respiratory hygiene. So, washing your hands for sure is important, since a lot of viruses survive on surfaces that they get onto your hands and then you touch your face and things like that. But, remember, how did the virus get onto the surface in the first place? It didn't magically appear. Somebody coughed or sneezed or breathed. It floated in the air for a while on respiratory droplets and then landed on the surface. So washing and filtering the air is really important, because that's where the viruses are floating around and you're breathing them in. So, when you can't wash or filter the air, then wearing a well-fitting mask is a good idea. So think about, if you're in a bus or an Uber or a cab, or even at a crowded office or a store, you want to be protecting yourself, because a lot of people who have illness, who are contagious, don't have symptoms yet. Especially with influenza, people are typically quite contagious for at least a day before they show symptoms of their infection. So they're at work feeling perfectly fine, spreading their germs around, or they're driving your bus or your Uber or sitting beside you or whatever. So always think about that. People always think about, what can I do to boost my immune system? There's a couple things. You can get enough sleep. That's a big one. And you can get vaccinated. That's the biggest bang for your buck. And there are vaccines for RSV and COVID and influenza, and it's not too late to benefit from their protection.
All right, Dr. Bardwaj, thank you.
My pleasure.
That is our medical column for this week with Dr. Raj Bardwaj. It is 3 minutes to 7 o'clock. Heather Wells is in with developing news.
Good morning. A national Muslim advocacy group wants an apology from one of the candidates who wants to lead Manitoba's PC party. The National Council of Canadian Muslims says it's dismayed Wally Dowdrich's campaign shared a Facebook post that ended with the statement, "We must stop Muslim Abi Khan from becoming conservative leader." The council says that it is an unacceptable post. The campaign for Wally Dowdrich says the post was only up for 4 days. We'll hear more about that. Premier Wab Kinew and other provincial leaders meet today with the Prime Minister in Ottawa. At the top of the First Minister's agenda, the response to Donald Trump's tariff threats. We'll hear what else Wab Kinew would like to see happen in this meeting. That's coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
And we'll hear more from a national perspective on that meeting in moments on World Report as well. -11 in Winnipeg, snow grains, and winds are southwest at 50 k's. So, yes, we're going to a high of 2 degrees, but this morning it feels really still cold, blustery out there. And if you're driving, just take it easy and check highways before you head out. You could have some blowing snow. Highways are 511, of course, to check. 788-3093 if you have any commuter updates for us. In the next hour of the program, we're going to dig into deeper details on the story Heather just mentioned about the PC leadership candidate and the National Muslim Advocacy Group and this repost. In addition, in the next hour at 7:40, we are going to hear from the twin sisters from LaSalle, Manitoba. We heard from their coach this week. These are the twins that are making waves in the hockey world. Over the weekend, they became the first Canadian twins to win gold at the World Women Under-18 Hockey Championships in Finland. So we'll have that interview coming up for you. And then at 10 to 8 to Serious Matters, a Winnipeg man has been cleaning up anti-Semitic graffiti in the Charleswood area. Heather was reporting on that yesterday in the newscast. But today we're going to speak with the chair of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network about the rise of white supremacist groups in Canada. And so stay tuned. That is coming up all in the next hour of Information Radio. You're on CBC. My name is Marcy Marcusa with our team here at the show. And next, World Report.
Today on The Current.
Transplantation is really a miracle that saves lives.
An easing of rules around drones in Canada means more of them in our skies, doing everything from delivering organs for transplants to helping with agriculture. How to balance the potential for drone innovation with concerns around privacy on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. It is another effort to protect Canada's economy from sweeping U.S. tariffs. The premiers and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau are meeting face-to-face today. As Olivia Stefanovich reports, they are working on a strategy to convince Donald Trump a 25% tariff is not in either country's best interests.
We got to have a strong response to the new Trump administration coming in.
Key to that response, Manitoba Premier Rob Canoe says, is a strong Team Canada.
I think the premiers of the provinces and territories are united when it comes to standing up for our jobs and natural resources.
But even before their meeting with the Prime Minister begins, divisions in the federal-provincial relationship are being magnified, with the premiers planning their own press conference following today's talks outside of the meeting location without Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
I think we need to be prepared that tariffs are coming.
And Alberta Premier Daniel Smith, who went to meet Donald Trump over the weekend at Mar-a-Lago.
Our view is that Canada needs to work together.
Dominic LeBlanc is the Federal Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs Minister. He's encouraging all premiers and business leaders to tap their contacts south of the border.
All of that is value added if we make the case together that these tariffs will hurt the American economy, it'll hurt American consumers.
But Trump appears to be moving full steam ahead, announcing plans to create a new government agency to collect revenue from tariffs, leaving the federal and provincial governments to decide how hard to hit back with their own retaliatory measures. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
British Columbia Premier David Eby says his province could provide a strong countermeasure to U.S. tariffs, withholding critical minerals needed for advanced technology. The CBC's Mira Baines has more on what Eby told the BC Natural Resources Forum last night.
We're facing a proposal of 25% tariffs from the incoming American administration. I don't have to tell anybody in this room how devastating that would be for our province.
The impact of tariffs on BC's forest industry is a major concern, but the province also produces a lucrative critical mineral, germanium.
If the United States doesn't get this metal from the Teck smelter and trail, it's not available at all.
Eby emphasized a united strategy to fight back that doesn't rule out retaliatory tariffs and export bans, which could affect critical minerals.
Teck's smelter and trail produces metal that is vital for night vision goggles and other electronic components. It was one of the two metals that China banned export of to the United States in response to measures the United States has taken against China.
Mining Association of BC President Michael Goring.
We have or produce 16 of the 50 critical minerals that the United States has identified as being critical to their economy and their national security.
Next month, the Premier will be heading to Washington, D.C. on a strategic trade mission. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Quebec Premier François Legault is warning ordinary Americans a tariff on Canadian goods will hurt them too. He published an open letter on the U.S. website The Hill this morning. Legault says he understands Donald Trump's desire to make the United States richer, but a tariff on all Canadian exports will cause a surge in inflation. Supporters of South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol are protesting in the streets of Seoul. The impeached leader was taken into police custody early this morning. Yoon's arrest follows a standoff between officers and his security team. Investigators are looking into Yoon's decision to declare martial law last month. This was the second try to bring him into custody. A failed attempt happened just over a week ago. Police now have 48 hours to question Yoon. After that, they have to seek a warrant to detain him or he has to be released. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is in Poland today, reminding European leaders Ukraine's independence paves the way for their independence. He says Ukraine was hit by another Russian air attack overnight.
With 40 rockets, some of them ballistic rockets, in the Kharkov, Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk regions.
Speaking through a translator, Zelenskyy confirmed gas plants and energy infrastructure were targeted. The state energy company had to make precautionary cuts. They leave Ukrainians in darkness during some very long and cold winter months. It's getting down to the final details for a ceasefire agreement in Gaza. Marathon talks in Qatar have negotiators on all sides saying a deal between Israel and Hamas is closer than ever. As Sasha Petrusik tells us from Jerusalem, the anticipation on the ground is building.
As hostage families rallied in central Tel Aviv overnight, there was none of the euphoria you might expect at news of a ceasefire. Instead, hugs and tears and lots of nail-biting by Daniel Lifshitz. His grandfather has been held in Gaza for 15 months.
I don't know what's his situation, so I try not to prepare, because what I'll prepare? To a funeral and to a celebration together?
They've had their hopes raised before with news that loved ones may be coming home, but repeatedly dashed. This time, the proposal calls for 33 hostages to be freed by Hamas in the first phase of a ceasefire, out of about 100. Yair Kashet doesn't believe it.
Actually, I'm afraid right now, because right now the deal is not sealed.
Meanwhile, the war continues. In Gaza, an Israeli airstrike overnight triggered what Osama Abu Kainas calls a belt of fire. It leveled houses to the ground, she says, holding her son, bodies everywhere. They've heard the news as well of a ceasefire deal described as imminent, one that would pull Israeli troops back and allow more aid in. Yahya Rashid is skeptical, but he says he has to believe it. The people are desperate, he says. We need to finish this at any cost to save the children of Gaza. With a deal still fragile, both Israelis and Palestinians know there are still no guarantees. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Strong winds are blowing through Southern California. A red flag warning for parts of Los Angeles and Ventura counties is in effect until noon today. And the danger is not just from the flames. The wind can whip up ash and dust. That worsens air quality and spreads toxic particles. People are being urged to stay indoors, but thousands of homes have been destroyed.
Every house in the neighborhood is gone. We were back in the canyons meeting with firefighters and just regular families who are just distraught. They have nowhere to go, literally sleeping in tents.
That is Woody Faircloth. He runs a nonprofit bringing RVs to people in emergency situations. He says 30 people have contacted his group to request a temporary home. A global commission of experts wants doctors to update the definition of obesity. It says the way obesity was traditionally understood is flawed, and the tools used to measure it are outdated. Health reporter Mike Crawley has more on how it could change the way people are treated by healthcare professionals.
Gets me out meeting the people.
Sandra Bernison volunteers in Hamilton with a weight loss support group called TOPS, or Taking Off Pounds Sensibly. She hears from members how obesity affects their lives.
They're made to feel like they're not as good as a person that's slim.
Fighting that stigma is part of what's driving the move by international medical experts to change how obesity is defined and diagnosed.
It's very important to enable folks to get the treatment that they need.
Dr. Catherine Morrison, a pediatric obesity specialist at McMaster University, is on the panel that's recommending a new definition published in Tuesday's Lancet.
This removes, we hope, this sort of burden on the individual that they have in some way caused this condition for themselves, and that we will treat it as we do any other disease like cancer and type 2 diabetes.
The panel recommends that doctors call the condition clinical obesity. They're no longer to diagnose it using body mass index, an often criticized ratio of weight to height. Instead, they're to use more accurate measurements of excess body fat and to consider whether that excess fat is affecting someone's health.
And obesity is not just about size.
Dr. Sean Wharton's research and practice in Burlington, Ontario focuses on obesity medicine. He supports the shift.
Get rid of judgment and stop talking about people's body size. Start talking about diseases.
The experts hope the new approach will ensure that people with serious illnesses linked to obesity get the treatment they need. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Hamilton.
And that is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, welcome Welcome to Wednesday morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. You're with The Morning Show, Information Radio. It's going to be a warmer high today. But the wind is going to be a big factor, so we'll talk about that in a sec. This hour on the program, a developing story. We are going to hear more, because it's been in the news this morning already, but we're going to hear more from the National Muslim Advisory Group that is denouncing one of Manitoba's progressive conservative leadership candidates. And so this just started to develop last night, this story. We're going to hear more about why they are denouncing Wally Dowdrich. So stay tuned. We'll walk you through the details of that story. Also, this hour on the program, there's been a lot of concern about anti-Semitic graffiti being sprayed, painted in Charleswood. We're going to talk to the chair of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network about what they call a rise in white supremacist groups in Canada. So stay tuned for that. With other developing news this morning, Heather Wells is in. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's plan to end homelessness is being criticized for not including enough social housing. The plan calls for the gradual decommissioning of homeless encampments and moving those people into housing, spaces to be freed up by convincing some better off Manitoba housing tenants to move into the private market with rent supports. We're going to hear from a U of W professor on that. And people in Dominion City, south of Winnipeg, are shocked after someone was shot and killed there by RCMP. Happened yesterday. Police say an officer shot a 33-year-old man who was armed with a metal object and refused to drop it. We'll hear from the Reeve of the Arm of Franklin coming up at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Abby, how is the weather?
We're still seeing some chilly temperatures, snow and wind gusts outside. That should ease off as we get into the day. Some windy conditions were felt in most of the areas, but temperatures would slowly rise just above that freezing point later. We're looking at temperatures in Winnipeg at this point around -11. The snow will taper off this morning. We should be, if you're on the perimeter or even outside the city, you should notice some local blowing snow, but that should settle down, and then we'll see a mix of sun and clouds later in the day. Temperatures will reach +2 for Winnipeg today, and for tonight we'll see partly cloudy conditions and a slight chance of flurries late in the evening into the overnight. Other regions, we're seeing the same similar conditions. Frost is that, snow, windy conditions. Brandon is seeing drifting snow at this time, but a mix of sun and clouds in the forecast later in the day, and we're seeing the snow taper off in most of the regions, giving way to sunny breaks later today. Right now, -11 with snow grains falling in the city.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
And now with an update on your morning commute, here's May McKillop.
Well, here in the city, there's a collision on Nairn at Gray, and it's partially blocking the westbound lanes. So expect westbound delays in that area and avoid the area if you can. And looking outside of Winnipeg, if you're traveling outside of the city today, if you're traveling northeast, you're gonna encounter probably some plows uncovering the roads. They're partially covered with a bit of snow right now due to the dust of snow last night, and we're seeing some reduced visibility from blowing snow conditions. As well, if you're heading out of Winnipeg southwest, kind of all the way until the western side of the province, we're seeing partially covered conditions along the highways and quite a bit of blowing snow, so some reduced visibility, particularly in the Brandon area. If you're seeing anything else going on in your commute and you wanted to let me know, I'll pass that message on to your fellow listeners. Give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, as you may have been hearing in Heather's newscast this morning, there is a national Muslim advocacy group that is denouncing Manitoba Progressive Conservative leadership candidate and Churchill hotelier Wally Dowdrich. He reshared a post to target rival PC candidate Abi Khan that they say is Islamophobic. Now, earlier this week, Dowdrich shared and later deleted a post on Facebook that ended with this statement, quote, "We must stop Muslim Abi Khan from becoming conservative leader," end quote. Khan, who is the PC MLA for Fort White, and Dowdrich are the only two candidates in the race. The National Council of Canadian Muslims is demanding a meeting with Dowdrich. Winnipegger Sadaf Ahmed is with the organization. And when speaking with the CBC's Bartley Kivas, she said that she became aware of the post after multiple community members shared it with her.
We have been contacted by Muslims in Manitoba over the course of the last week about this incident a number of times. Like several different members of the Muslim community have reached out to us, and we have seen sort of the issue itself gain traction in the community that way.
So I saw your post on Twitter. You stated that you wished to see action from the Progressive Conservative Party. But first of all, with the post itself, this is a post by somebody else, but it's reposted by Wally Dowdrich. How did you feel about this?
This is a provincial leadership race, and as such, we would expect that all leadership candidates, any leadership candidate, abide by the basic principles and policies of their parties and engage in a robust contest with their fellow candidates, but one that is without any discrimination. And so we find Mr. Doddridge's repost highly irresponsible and divisive, and we have reached out to him, and we find it unacceptable.
So I briefly spoke to Mr. Dowdrich's campaign manager, who said that when he was made aware of this, that they took down the repost last night. What do you wish Mr. Dowdrich to do? We
would like Mr. Dowdrich to take this opportunity to engage with the Muslim community. We as an organization, we have reached out to connect with Mr. Dowdrich ourselves, but we would also expect him to show a willingness to sit down with the Muslim community at large, engage with its leaders, the leaders of mosques and major organizations, and engage in dialogue, right, to understand better the communities that he would be representing if made leader of the party.
Do you buy the explanation that this was a mistake, that this was a long repost, and that they didn't notice this was at the bottom?
As a provincial leadership candidate, it's incumbent upon any individual to ensure that they have carefully scrutinized anything that they are choosing to repost, in particular if they are choosing to repost it rather than write the post themselves, right? So that's our response to that. We fully expect Mr. Dowdrich to take accountability if he would like to rescind his amplification of the post in question. We are very happy to accept that rescindment, and further, we would expect and encourage him to engage with the Muslim community. Again, it would be a community that he would be representing as a leader of a major provincial party.
And what are you expecting from the Progressive Conservative Party of Manitoba?
Ultimately, again, we primarily seek accountability from Mr. Dowdrich. That being said, from the candidate in question, that being said, if a candidate chooses not to respond adequately, and then in that case we would expect that the party would expect the party to respond appropriately to that choice of inaction. And in our view, of course, a party should not allow anyone who besmirches the reputation of a candidate through tactics of discrimination to proceed in such a manner without being held to account. Muslim Manitobans are a proud people. We have lived here for generations, and we are always happy and willing to sit down and engage with anybody who would like to learn more and do better.
Winnipegger Sadaf Ahmed with the National Council of Canadian Muslims. She was speaking there with the CBC's Bartley Kivas. Now, as you heard, Bartley was working on this story into the evening last night, and he did connect with Dowdrich's campaign that did say the repost was up for 4 days, and it was deleted, they say, as soon as it was flagged. Khan says he is hurt and wants Dowdrich to take responsibility. The PC Leadership Election Committee says that Dowdrich must commit to making the party open to all religions. If you want to read more about the story, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Be an Iron Man and curl No, not your hair. This is curling on the frozen ice of the Assiniboine River. Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel is back February 7th to 9th. Form a team, embrace the winter with one hand, a rock with the other, and join the Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel, sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
Pretty cool, right? Let's just take this down a notch for a second and explain what you're listening to. So this is the hallucination. Think of the word hallucination. Kind of vibes with the music, right? They're kicking off 2025 with a new track. So this is Babylon. It pays tribute to the Ottawa Club where the musical journey began for this group. Bear Witness of the electronic duo is going to be on cue later today to talk all about this and its creation. But we'll listen a little bit more to get us to morning sports. Hallucination and Babylon on CBC. Cool, right? That is a hallucination. Hallucination is what they're called. If they sound familiar a little bit, maybe, did you catch something familiar in the sounds? They are formerly a Tribe Called Red. So Hallucination is going to be on cue today, talking about their new music. What we've been listening to is Babylon. And so you can hear a conversation with the group coming up at 10 o'clock today on CBC Radio's Q. Well, let's update what's going on in traffic. I was just on CBC Traffic Management Center and still Narenik Gray. There was a collision there. Emergency crews had been on scene. So Narenik Gray westbound, you're going to have some lanes blocked, partially blocked. And we understand at points there could be large delays. So if you are needing that area on your morning commute, you may in fact want to avoid it or update us on what it's looking like there. In addition, speaking of updates, May's on the phone right now, and she just talked to someone that is driving westbound on the North Perimeter, turning south onto Brookside Boulevard. There is a collision there now on the bridge. So it's backed up 1K already as we try to understand what is developing there. So that is westbound North Perimeter turning south onto Brookside Boulevard, a collision there on the bridge. So expect delays there as well. Take it easy and continue to call us, 788-3093. As we mentioned, May's on the phone right now, but we'll get that next traffic update on with anything urgent. The conditions out there are really just, I think, probably getting maybe a little bit icier because of the winds. That often happens, of course, in this kind of weather. It's -11 in Windsor Southwest at 44. Well, next on the show, let's start in the NHL, where thanks to one player in particular, the Jets beat the Canucks, and Scott Regehr is here. Super fun last night for Jets fans.
Yeah, 6-1 over the Canucks. Kyle Connor is that one player in particular. Seems he can score goals quite well. A natural hat trick, actually, in the first period. So that's 3 goals uninterrupted by anybody else on either side scoring. And the third quickest hattie in club history, Marcy. Only Blake Wheeler and Sean Monahan managed goals in a quicker succession than the 6.5 minutes it took Kyle last night. So with those 3 goals, more than enough to beat the Canucks. The last goal that he scored came on a breakaway where Connor faked a couple of moves before eventually sliding the puck at almost the goal line, and his coach Scott Arniel was asked about the patience of his leading scorer.
I was always jealous because you hear those skill guys, those great players, they say it's like they slow down and go in slow motion. I was the opposite. My brain was going 100 miles an hour, but they get in there and he's thinking about probably 3 different moves that he might try. The normal person is just probably trying to do something as fast as possible, and that's just another skill set that he has.
Yeah, well said from Scott Arniel there. Another American was pretty good, too. Connor Hellebuck almost got his second shutout in as many games, but a shot beat him in the third period. So Winnipeg back in action tomorrow night. They'll host the Seattle Kraken.
Let's go to the Pebbled Ice now, where a few Manitoba rinks are off to strong starts at a Grand Slam event.
Yeah, Winnipeg's Caitlin Laws, Marcy, and Gimli's Carrie Anderson won their openers yesterday at the Masters. This is being held in Guelph, Ontario. Laws scored in 4 straight ends against her Swedish opponent, while Anderson thumped Alberta's Kayla Skrillik 10-1. More good news for Team Anderson, though. Lead Brianne Harris was cleared of wrongdoing by the Court of Arbitration for Sport nearly a year after she tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs. Harris, who was facing a possible 4-year suspension, was found to have, quote-unquote, fulfilled her duty of care by exercising reasonable caution. She had tested positive for Lingandrol after being exposed to it by her husband. And Harris told CBC, quote, "I have been shaking all morning since receiving the news that I thought I would never receive. I am exonerated, and it feels so incredibly amazing." End quote. It is not known when Harris might return. Team Anderson, who recently added Carly Burgess as an injury replacement, said they're happy, they're thankful for Harris's case being resolved, and they're going to make any lineup decisions once the Masters has concluded.
Finally, in tennis, it's been a successful day for Canada down under as well.
It has. Leylah Fernandez, Marcy, won her match this morning. Thus, she is through to the third round of the Aussie Open for the very first time. Felix Auger-Aliassime still playing right now. He's in the 5th set and tied up, but it looks like he could join Leylah in the third round. And in doubles, Ottawa's Gabriela Dabrowski won her opening contest alongside her partner Erin Routliffe. Dabrowski recently revealed, Marcy, that she was diagnosed and beat breast cancer. In Melbourne today, reporters asked her why she went public with her battle.
Meeting other survivors early on that had been through worse than me and had come out the other side and ran triathlons or marathons, and you're like, whoa, okay. So meeting people that had accomplished those kinds of physical feats really reassured me that this was something that I was going to be able to get through. That was really helpful. So I just hope that I could be maybe that person for someone else one day.
After a diagnosis last April, Dabrowski went through 2 surgeries, after which she received endocrine therapy. While doing this, she made it to the Wimbledon finals in July. She won a bronze medal at the Paris Olympics in August, and then in December became the first Canadian to ever claim a title at the WTA finals. In Melbourne, she's trying to win her first Australian Open, Marcy. I would not bet against her.
Right?
Yeah.
All right, Scott, thank you.
You bet.
And it's Scott Rigueur with Morning Sports on CBC. A couple traffic notes before the news here. Westbound North Perimeter turning south onto Brookside Boulevard. Collision on the bridge. Northbound West Perimeter, a fender bender at the train tracks at Oak Bluff as well. Very slippery in the area and on the perimeter this morning. We're getting calls. In addition, Nairn at Gray, there was an earlier collision. Crews may still be on scene. Westbound lanes are partially blocked there. Right now it is time for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is -11 right now. We're headed to 2 this afternoon. Hang on, it is a fast warm-up, and we're being pushed there partially by the wind, south gusting to 50 this morning. Mix of sun and clouds this afternoon. Manitoba's plan to end homelessness is being criticized for not including enough social housing. The plan calls for the gradual decommissioning of homeless encampments and moving those people into housing, spaces to be freed up by convincing some better-off Manitoba housing tenants to move into the private market with rent supports. Professor Shauna McKinnon works in the Department of Urban and Inner City Studies at the University of Winnipeg.
I just find that, appalling, because the reality is that you're not going to resolve homelessness by, moving people who are already vulnerable out of public housing into this sort of supply of housing that we know doesn't exist. And so you're going to get some people into housing, and then you're making a whole bunch of other people vulnerable.
The province says it is in the process of adding 300 new social units and support services. McKinnon says that doesn't come close to the 10,000 new units that are needed. A national Muslim advocacy group wants an apology from one of the candidates vying to lead Manitoba's Progressive Conservative Party. The National Council of Canadian Muslims says it is dismayed Wally Dowdrich's campaign shared a Facebook post that ended with the statement, "We must stop Muslim Abi Khan from becoming Conservative leader." Khan, the MLA for Fort White, is Dowdrich's rival in this campaign. Sadaf Ahmed speaks for the National Council in Manitoba.
We find Mr. Dodrich's repost highly irresponsible and divisive, and we have reached out to him, and we find it unacceptable.
Dowdrich's campaign says the repost was only up for 4 days. His campaign manager says it was deleted as soon as it was flagged. Khan says he is hurt and wants Dowdrich to take responsibility. A small Manitoba town is shaken by news a man was fatally shot by RCMP. It happened yesterday in Dominion City, a town of 300. Police say an officer shot a 33-year-old man who was armed with a metal object and refused to drop it. Dave Carlson is the Reeve in the arm of Franklin, which includes Dominion City.
Shocking, and it's distressing, and it's something you don't expect to have happen. But, I mean, in this day and age, things are getting a little more... there's a lot more incidences of things like this, and it's not never to be expected, but I guess it happens now.
Carlson can't recall another shooting ever in Dominion City. Manitoba's police watchdog is investigating. The incoming Trump administration is top of the agenda at the First Minister's meeting just about to get underway in Ottawa this morning. Premier Wab Kinew and other premiers are going to sit down with the Prime Minister. They hope to formulate a response to possible U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods. Wab Kinew says his priorities are the cost of living, military spending, and the employment rate.
Well, I hope that we have a unified Team Canada approach, responding to Inauguration Day next week in the U.S. and then whatever we see come forward after that. I know for us, though, in Manitoba, it's about jobs.
Kinew says he is also focused on Canada meeting its military spending targets. A program to help international students at the University of Winnipeg improve their English skills is coming to an end. The U of W announced it is cutting its English language program along with the university women's soccer team. The school says it faces significant financial challenges. It says enrollment in the language program is down because of international student caps imposed by Ottawa. Asher Jiao is a University of Winnipeg collegiate student. He learned English before moving here with his family from China.
I totally understand at this core it's still a business and money is important, but I've personally helped a lot of international students, and I don't see the reason why they're cutting down this program entirely. Our teachers are very dedicated. I'm sure there's an alternative to this problem right now, and it's really heartbreaking to see the support being taken away from these students who need it the most.
The U of W says the program is no longer financially viable because of dropping enrollment. Well, Kyle Connor put on a show at Canada Life Centre.
What a finish by Connor! The Hats litter the ice. He's got all three.
All of that in the first period on TSN as the Jets sank the Canucks 6-1. Those 3 goals came in 6 minutes and 38 seconds. Kyle Connor now with the 3rd fastest hat trick in franchise history. He credits his teammates for getting the puck to him at the right time.
Get a recipient of a nice pass in the first one from Gabe, put it in, and then the next, just kind of be in the right spot, and one of those that the bounces just seem to be going the right way, especially early. And we've had those nights where the other night we're hitting posts and they're not going your way. So just one of those nights where able to bury a couple.
The Jets stay here at home, hosting Seattle in town tomorrow night. You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thanks, Heather. Exciting times last night.
Great times. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
You told this great story just before you go about, I guess the camera cut to a Vancouver fan?
So all the fans were just going wild, hats on the ice, and there's this Vancouver fan sitting, and he's wearing a Vancouver jersey with his hands over top of the Canucks emblem on his jersey.
Kind of sheepishly covering up his team.
Poor guy.
Yeah, well, we know how he felt about the game. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Heather was mentioning that to me, by the way, earlier in the news center, so I thought that was funny. Poor guy, as she said. All right, let's get into what's happening in the weather forecast. We know that the commute is a serious thing here this morning. It's really slippery and such. We're going to get to those details in a moment. May's been taking calls. But Abby, that is largely because of the wind, right?
Yeah, because of the wind and, fresh snow falling on partly icy roads already would be a challenge this morning. We're waking up to snow down south, and that should clear to a mix of sun and clouds later, while the northern region seeing more snow with colder conditions. In Winnipeg, we're seeing these light snow grains falling outside. Temperatures around -11. That should taper off this morning. Then we'll see the day bring in a mix of sun and clouds with some windy conditions to go with that. Our highs would get to +2 today, and then partly cloudy conditions would come later in the evening, with temperatures dropping to around -6. Similar conditions around the Pembina Valley region. We're seeing temperatures at this time around -6 with light snow. Highs would also be around +2. Heading to Westman, Brandon is sitting at -7 at this time. Folks there would notice drifting snow, so if you're commuting on the highway in that region, you should take it easy. Expect a high of +1, and that breezy conditions from the northwest will be something to take into consideration. In the Parkland region, we're seeing temperatures around -2 at this time. Dauphin is clear. The high will be +4 for that region, and temperatures will drop to around -8 later tonight. In the Interlake region, Gimli seeing blowing snow at this time with the current temperature around -11. That should clear as you get into the morning, and the high is around +2. That breezy conditions will shift from the south to the west later in the day. Moving north, we're seeing the power flin-flon around 0 already. It's clear out there. Light snow in the forecast. High will stay around 0, and temperatures will dip below freezing later tonight. Further north in Thompson, we're seeing temperatures around -7. Light snow falling there. We should see this period of light snow and freezing drizzle for that region. The high will be around -1, and for tonight, temperatures will drop further to -7. In Churchill, it is -12. Snow and blowing snow being spotted in that part of the province, along with a high of -14 this afternoon. So across board, down south, we should see a mix of sun and clouds with windy conditions in many areas, and temperatures will warm up to a mild +2.
All right. Well, we'll see if the wind dies down enough for us to enjoy that. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
On the commute, as we mentioned, May's been on the phone, especially in the last 10 minutes, a lot. So what's going on?
Yeah, in the last 10 minutes, we're getting a lot of calls about the perimeter specifically. What we're seeing on the perimeter is a lot of slippery conditions due to that blowing snow. In some areas, you can't see where the lines are. So we got two different calls. One area that we're looking at is westbound on North Perimeter, turning south onto the Brookside Boulevard. There's a collision on the bridge. It's backed up about 1 kilometer. So if you're crossing any bridges, particularly that one, you're going to want to look out for slippery conditions. And for that area, you might want to avoid and find a new route if you can. That's on westbound on North Perimeter, just turning onto Brookside Boulevard. As well on West Perimeter, driving northbound, there's a small fender bender at the train tracks at Oak Bluff. As well in that area, we heard it's very, very slippery. If you're approaching intersections, you want to use caution, brake early if you can. And looking outside of the city, if you're traveling out in the northeast side of the province, we're seeing again tons of partially covered, snow-covered conditions with some reduced visibility. It's similar along Highway Number 1 into Brandon and south of Brandon as well. So use caution along the highways. We're hearing lots about slippery conditions, but I can see that the plows are moving their way through the highways. If you wanted to give us an update on any of those areas along the perimeter or in the city, actually, I just remembered we have one more update on the Nairn and Gray collision. There's emergency crews on scene now, but you're going to want to use caution traveling through and expect large westbound delays in that area. It's backed up to about Panet. Anything else you're seeing out there, please give me a call and let me know. 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, May. This is black ice weather, right? It's the kind of ice that just sort of comes up on you. You don't see it. It looks like pavement. So it's just perfect conditions for that kind of stuff this morning. So take it easy out there and just, think about that before you head out. Not that I'm preaching. I always say, though, when I drive to work in the morning, there's not a lot of people on the roadways. So sometimes I don't even appreciate what that's like and how quickly you can get in a collision. So hopefully everything's all right in these incidents. We'll report what we know once we know. It is 7:41 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app or YouTube. This is Information Radio on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team. Kevin Ipatebo, May McKillop, and Abby Adiemi behind the glass for the show this morning. Well, next, we've been celebrating women's hockey, and specifically two young women from Manitoba whose coach we spoke with a couple of days ago, and that is because they have achieved gold. They shoot, they score, they win. The two sisters from LaSalle, Manitoba, that I'm referring to, who are making waves in the hockey world and in the history books. As I mentioned, we spoke to their coach on Information Radio about their win at the Women's Under-18 Hockey Championship. But CBC's Brittany Greenslade this morning has a conversation with the twins.
Two Manitoba sisters have made Canadian history. On Sunday, Sarah and Kate Mannis stood atop the world stage with their teammates after capturing gold at the Women's Under-18 Hockey Championship. The 17-year-olds are the fifth set of sisters to represent Canada at the U18 Women's Worlds, but they're the very first to do it together. And straight off their win in Finland, the duo join me now. Thank you to you both so much for joining us. First off,
thank you.
A very, very big congratulations to you both on the win. How are you feeling?
Thank you so much. It feels amazing. I haven't stopped thinking about it really. It still doesn't really seem real, honestly. Yeah, it feels so unreal. The thought that this is something we dream about, that game, to win gold, it just feels amazing.
I know you both must be extremely tired. You had a travel day from Finland yesterday, and you're back in Ontario right now. I want to touch base just a little bit on playing together as sisters. You've always played together on the same teams. I have three siblings. I can't imagine doing everything with my sibling. We're all very competitive. So what is it like playing together? Is there any sort of rivalry, competitiveness? Talk to me about that.
We're always competing with each other, especially when we're doing development or training. So we're always competing, always trying to make each other better. And then just playing on the same team, we always kind of look for each other on the ice, and we always kind of know where each other are and know what to expect. Yeah, we used to have an outdoor rink at our house in LaSalle, and so we would do a lot of one-on-ones, even though there wasn't that much room. But I think we did it so much, it kind of just built up into becoming better at it, and obviously we wanted to win every single time. So I think it made us more competitive and probably a lot better in the long run too.
Well, you are Manitobans. You just said that. You both started by playing hockey on boys' teams. So what was that like? And do you think that helped you with your training?
Yeah, it was always like competitive, and you always had to work a little bit extra harder to like fit in with the boys and be up there. So that definitely kind of helped us compete harder and like train more. Yeah, I'd say like the compete that the boys had was really, really strong. I mean, every single one of them wanted to be the best. And so, like in order to thrive in that kind of hockey, you have to work super hard and compete super hard and work really hard on and off the ice to become stronger, better, faster. So I think when we made the switch to girls hockey, it wasn't too hard of a switch. I think we were prepared, and yeah, it helped us out a lot for sure.
Well, you're both role models for so many Manitobans here and so many Canadians. What was it like to be able to play for your country?
To play for my country was amazing. I mean, I think you even appreciate it more the second year because this is my second year for playing on the U18 team. And I think like you just look back, even like after the first Worlds I had, you just look back and you think how amazing it was being able to represent your country and being one of those players out there that can make a difference. And so it never gets old. It's amazing every time I put the jersey on, and I'm so thankful to have been able to represent Canada. Yeah, it's such an honor to represent like your country and like wear that logo. It feels so great, and like this is like what you train for your whole life, kind of to get to this moment, and just like getting that gold medal just felt amazing.
Very quickly, what is next for you both?
I guess just finishing the year here in Burlington, hopefully winning another provincial championship, national championship. And then we're both going to Clarkson next year. So I'm super excited for that, and hopefully have a great start there. Yep.
Congratulations to you both. Canada was here cheering you on. Big congratulations. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
That's CBC's Brittany Greenslade in conversation with Sarah and Kate Mannis. The twin sisters won gold, were part of the team at the World Women's Under-18 Hockey Championships in Finland. It makes them the first set of Canadian twins to achieve this.
Arctic glaciers, the Amazon rainforest, the Great Barrier Reef. Unique tourism destinations because they are vanishing. Last Chance Tourism on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on demand on CBC Listen.
When you have to leave everything behind,
you're just trying to find a way to stay here for a better life.
What are the real costs of making a new start?
I have faced so many hardships financially, emotionally, and physically.
A CBC News series looks at what it's really like for newcomers.
I am losing hope.
Welcome to Canada, the immigrant experience.
Prepare yourself because coming here is not that easy.
Everywhere you get CBC News.
13 minutes to 8 o'clock now on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Misty in Winnipeg now -11. Drifting snow in Brandon, and it is -7. And Thompson's got light snow and -6. So Winnipeg's high is 2 degrees, and we will celebrate that. But the wind is going to make it feel still like a blustery cold day. Winds south 30 to 50. The big issues with the wind is it's making everything slick out there. So be careful. We've got issues on the perimeter. We've got emergency crews on scene, Nairn at Grey out in Transcona. 788-3093 if you do see some problems that we have should be reporting this morning that are affecting your commute. Well, coming up after 8 o'clock on the program, the province unveiled its new strategy to end homelessness. It involves a lot of moving people from encampments into housing, moving people in existing Manitoba housing into a different type of housing. It involves a lot of supports that are not yet created. It's a big plan. It's ambitious. We're going to talk to the new senior advisor to the province on homelessness about what the strategy looks like in some detail. So stay tuned. That's coming up after 8 o'clock. We're going to also hear from some Winnipeggers who are living houseless about what they think of this strategy. So stay with us. Right now, though, there has been a lot of discussion about hate crime in this country, and in Winnipeg, we are not excluded. Winnipeg police say a 19-year-old man has been charged with 26 counts of mischief in connection with anti-Semitic graffiti found throughout a West Winnipeg neighborhood. The Jewish Federation of Winnipeg has described this as an act of, quote, pure hatred. Earlier this month, symbols of swastikas and the initials MKY were among the things spray painted on public and private properties in the Charleswood area. You may have heard us reporting on some of this in the news yesterday morning. Well, MKY is a neo-Nazi group which allegedly originated in the Ukraine. It appears to be gaining traction, though, in other parts of the world. And to talk more about what we know about the group, or what he knows, Bernie Ferber is with us, the chair of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. And Bernie joins us via Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning.
What is the MKY group?
It's a group that has been formed over the last number of years. As a matter of fact, we've been seeing a lot of neo-Nazi and hard right-wing groups, but this group is extremely disconcerting, because what they do is they prey on young people. They go into young people's spaces, and they are probably one of the most groups that use and advocate the use of assault and of hurting people. Basically, MKY, as a matter of fact, stands for Maniac Murder Cult, and that's a translation from the Russian. The group itself was formed around 2017, in which they allegedly put some clips onto the Russian form of Telegram, which is a social media platform, of some very violent acts, and the media and social media being what it was, it has spread really like wildfire right across the world. There may be those that just pick up on the letters MKY, have nothing to do with it, but try to frighten people. Now, let's understand that the MKY is both a neo-Nazi organization, and more importantly, it is an accelerationist organization. So what do we mean by that? What do we mean by accelerationist? It is an organization that, through violent acts, wishes to bring down ordered society, and they want to do it in as quick a way as possible. So instead of just painting, signs and signals and swastikas and that type of thing, they act out in sometimes very disgusting ways their plan, and they really want to bring down society as it is.
A couple of questions here out of what you've shared with us already, Bernie. One of them is, you said they go into spaces. They actively go into spaces, and I believe you said where they can target young people. What's your language?
Correct.
Are you referring to social media spaces, or what do you mean about that?
I am referring specifically to social media spaces. This is a group that has learned to use social media quite effectively, and they've scared people, and really for good reason. Some of their clips, as I say, have been quite violent. And they will go into different kinds of spaces, not your normal spaces. They'll be found sometimes with games spaces where young people are playing out games in various different forms. They will go into places like Telegram, which is a social interactive space. So they are they are plentiful, and they know how to get into various different places.
Yeah, and no worries about clearing your throat. I know you shared you had a cold.
Yes,
we're just grateful you're with us this morning. How would they appear in a game? Would they appear as a player and then all of a sudden start veering off? Would they create a relationship first and then build into what their real intention is in being in that space? What have you seen?
Very, very much so. That is exactly what we see, is that they would appear as a player. As a matter of fact, they would do the same thing in other social media as places like Telegram, where they will appear somewhat, as a legitimate player in terms of trying to get information across, and they will themselves accelerate their own meaning. And young people, especially those that are looking for ways of changing the world, no matter how it changes, glob onto this. And we haven't seen it yet that much in Canada. Thankfully, we haven't seen the outright violence that has occurred, but we have seen what you've seen in Winnipeg. We've seen them in other places as well, where they will paint swastikas on the sides of buildings, especially synagogues, of course, and their own initials. MKY.
And you said it allegedly, I had said allegedly originated in Ukraine. You mentioned Russia.
Yeah.
So it moved, I guess. And how widespread is it in other parts of the world now then?
Well, it is becoming more widespread. We're talking about it, which is exactly what they want us to do. But at the same time, I think we have to get information out there and let people know how dangerous this group is. So yes, it started in the Ukraine, over into Russia. It has come here into North America, and they have used this form of these tactics of painting swastikas and they are, of course, especially anti-Semitic.
So let me ask about what happened in Winnipeg here. As I mentioned, this 19-year-old charged in Winnipeg with 26 counts of mischief and accused of painting racist graffiti in Charleswood. So he was not charged with a hate crime. Police said it didn't meet the criteria for a hate crime outlined in the criminal code. You've just said that people may be picking up this MKY and painting it. In some cases, knowing what they're doing, in some cases not. I'm just curious what your response is to that.
I'm hoping that the police will take a closer look at the situation and bring in some experts who have some knowledge about MKY and other types of development of hate crime. To charge this as simply a means by which to cause disorder, I don't think covers it. And look, there are a lot of people out there, a lot of the citizens who are really concerned about the level of hate crime and concerned that the police aren't doing enough. I'm not saying that the police aren't doing enough. I think that they can do more, and I think that they have to look at the various laws out there. And the hate laws themselves do allow for some elasticity here. Where the crimes can be charged against this individual.
Also, I guess critical to understand was where this individual who is in Winnipeg, if in fact has knowledge of what was, and if there's allegation around some of this, so I'm being careful, but if this individual is directly connected and proven to have put the MKY up specifically, then what is the knowledge? Where did it come from? I'm wondering what you would say to parents and others involved with young people about what to watch for as we watch these groups growing.
Well, I would watch the games that your son or daughter is engaged in online. Certainly, not all of them are targets, but many of them are targeted. And I think that it's important for parents to keep an eye on what their children are doing online. If they see initials MKY, if they see patterned SS insignias, which is of course the Schutzstaffel, it's the neo-Nazi symbol for SS. Or other such symbols, or if they're just curious and they don't understand, they should bring it to the attention of police authorities or their schools, where there is certain information available. Secondly, the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, of which I am the founding chair, has developed a handbook in relation to understanding hate crime and what's going on. Antihate.ca will get you all the information that you need. And if there is even an inkling, a thought that your son or daughter is becoming sort of involved in this, I think it's incredibly important that they don't wait. They take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and get their own information and determine whether or not this is appropriate.
We'll leave our conversation there this morning, Bernie. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's Bernie Ferber, the chair of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. Heather Wells is in now with other developing stories.
Good morning. Well, Wab Kinew is in Ottawa this morning, ready to sit down in a First Minister's meeting.
We got to have a strong response to the new Trump administration coming in.
Manitoba's Premier and his counterparts asked for this meeting with the Prime Minister. One of their priorities is looking to appease Donald Trump on one of his key concerns, border security. And people in downtown Dominion City, south of Winnipeg, are shocked after a man was shot and killed by RCMP. It happened yesterday in the town of about 300 people. We'll hear from that area's Reeve in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, speaking of the province, the new strategy to tackle homelessness was announced yesterday. We're going to dig into it with the newly announced senior advisor to the province on this. -11 right now, strong winds. Our high is 2 today. The streets are just slick. Narran and Gray collisions now cleared. There's a stalled car now in the curb lane northbound Kenniston, just north of Grant. And we have been getting calls from the north and west perimeters about how slick it is with some incidents out there. Take it easy. 788-3093.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Like a lot of kids who grew up in Kelowna, BC, Taylor Kitsch started out playing hockey. He was pretty good until 2 tragic injuries put the brakes on that. Since then, he's become one of the most in-demand actors in Hollywood. He'll be here to tell you his story and about his new show.
We do what we have to do.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with El-Amin Abdelmahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
An easing of rules around drones in Canada means more of them in our skies, doing everything from delivering organs for transplants to helping with agriculture. How to balance the potential for drone innovation with concerns around privacy on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. One of Donald Trump's first acts in office on Monday could radically change the Canadian economy. Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is meeting with the country's premiers to prepare. They want to stop a 25% tariff from being placed on Canadian goods, and if they can't, they need to protect Canadian workers. Janice McGregor is in our parliamentary bureau. And Janice, what are the premiers saying heading into this meeting?
Marcia, their chair, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, has been out for weeks saying premiers are going to take the lead on this file. But when the focus turned to the role that Canadian energy exports are going to play in a retaliation strategy to respond to Donald Trump's tariff threats, well, their common front broke down. So when Ford emerged from his meeting with Intergovernmental Affairs Minister Dominic LeBlanc yesterday at Queen's Park, he said dealing with Trump is Ottawa's problem.
They play a key role. This is their file. We're there to support them.
After earlier saying that Ottawa needed to get its act together, Ford said he actually liked the border plan that LeBlanc showed him. Provinces are contributing policing resources to help with that. But stepping up border security no longer appears to be enough, especially after Trump's latest social media blast made the motives of his incoming administration more clear. Trump's base believes they can raise tariff revenues to a level where they can eventually lower or even replace American income taxes. A return to how governments worked a century ago, and a proposal that both economists and the U.S. business community argue won't work. Populist nationalism also may be contagious. Listen to Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew as he arrived in Ottawa last night.
And hey, if the rest of the world is starting to look at onshoring and just bringing manufacturing and the actual job of building stuff back home, then that's what we should be doing too.
So how is the business community feeling about this?
Very nervous and prepared now to take things into their own hands. A coalition representing Canada's major exporters, both corporate industry and labour groups, met with Canada's ambassador in Washington last week and launched a new Canada-US Trade Council to share intelligence and coordinate their responses at a time when political leadership remains in flux. Canada's aluminum and steel industries are going to take the lead. They, more than anyone, know what it's going to take to fight a trade war.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Mark Carney will be launching his bid for the Liberal leadership on Thursday in Edmonton. Calgary Liberal MP George Cahal sent an invite to Alberta Liberals this morning. He says he will be supporting Carney. The former Bank of Canada governor was born in the Northwest Territories and raised in Edmonton. In Seoul.
제가 해보겠습니다. 윤석열 만세!
Supporters of impeached South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol protest in the streets. Yoon was taken into custody early this morning. The arrest follows a standoff between police and Yoon security at the presidential compound. Yoon is under investigation over his failed martial law declaration a month ago. Patrick Falk has more.
The operation to arrest President Yoon Suk-yeol got underway early this morning in Seoul.
This was the second attempt to bring him in following a botched effort just over a week ago. Supporters of the president like Kim Woo-ki have been camped outside Yoon's official residence for days, braving icy conditions.
If the president were to be arrested, all of us here, the people of this country, will be prepared to stop the arrest at all costs.
As dawn broke, police breached the walls of the presidential compound. More than 1,000 officers were on hand in an operation designed to overwhelm the presidential security service who've been protecting Yoon from arrest. Reports say there were tense negotiations with the president's legal team. Later, a motorcade carrying the president was seen leaving the compound. In a video statement, Yoon described the execution of the arrest warrant against him as deplorable.
I decided to respond to the investigation, despite it being an illegal investigation, to prevent bloodshed. However, that doesn't mean I acknowledge the investigation.
South Korea's Corruption Investigation Office has 48 hours to question Yoon. It then needs to decide whether to request a warrant to detain him. Patrick Falk for CBC News, Seoul.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is in Poland today, reminding European leaders Ukraine's independence paves the way for their independence. He says Ukraine was hit by another Russian air attack overnight.
With 40 rockets, some of them ballistic rockets, in the Kharkov, Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk regions.
Speaking through a translator, Zelenskyy confirmed gas plants and energy infrastructure were targeted. The state energy company had to make precautionary power cuts. They leave Ukrainians in darkness during some very long and cold winter months. People in Los Angeles are eager to return to their homes and survey the damage done to their neighborhoods, but first it has to be safe to go back. And the wind has to slow down. That is not expected to happen before noon today. Freelance reporter Steve Futterman is in Los Angeles with the latest. And Steve, how strong have the winds been overnight?
Marcia, they've been strong, but not as strong as we expected. Earlier in the week, the National Weather Service was saying you could expect gusts up to maybe 112 kilometers an hour. They have lowered those expectations. We may have gusts that are high, but only about 80 kilometers an hour. And to compare that to last week, the gusts reached 160 kilometers an hour. So the winds are much less than last week and much less than they expected. And LA is still a bit cautious, nervous, but maybe they're going to get through this PDS, particularly dangerous situation. That's an actual term used by the National Weather Service, expected to last for another, 10 to 12 hours.
If Los Angeles gets through today, is there better weather ahead?
Absolutely. The National Weather Service says that starting tomorrow, more moisture is going to be in the air. The winds are going to be much, much less reasonable winds, and the relative humidity is going to go up. So these are three things that will definitely help firefighters. The Weather Service says if LA, Southern California gets by today, it's in relatively good shape.
Some people, though, are still afraid for their homes and are still looking for private firefighters. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it's an economic thing. If you have a lot of money, you can hire private firefighters. And in fact, we've seen situations here in Pacific Palisades where private firefighters were hired and they were able to protect some homes and some businesses. It's very, very expensive. But if you have disposable income, if you have enough of it, you can put your money into that. And often it does work.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Marcia.
Steve Futterman reporting from Los Angeles. Joe Biden is preparing to say goodbye to Americans. The 46th president of the United States will deliver his final speech from the Oval Office tonight. In just 5 days, he hands over power to Donald Trump. This morning, Biden released a letter to the American people. And the CBC's Chris Reyes joins me now from New York with more. Chris, what does it say?
So President Joe Biden opens the letter by bringing Americans back to the moment when he was elected, called on to restore America's soul after a pandemic, an economic crisis, and a tumultuous Trump presidency. A lot of what's in this letter is what we'll hear tonight. Biden touts his legislative record, like signing the first major gun safety law in 30 years and lowering prescription drugs for seniors. He also boasted about the economy and how wages and the number of new jobs are up and inflation is down. But where you really hear Biden's voice, the one that Americans have come to know, is in the wistful last paragraphs when he describes his humble beginnings as a kid with a stutter from a small town. Biden writes, "I have given my heart and soul to our nation, and I have been blessed a million times in return with the love and support of the American people."
What kind of legacy is he leaving?
You know, it's quite obvious with this farewell week, Marcia, that President Biden is trying very hard to make sure that his legacy is protected and that it's in his own words. This caps a political career spanning more than 50 years. For Biden and his supporters, his legacy will be about that lifetime of service. Now, the bigger question is whether Biden's final words will resonate with Americans, some of whom blame him for inflation, for two raging wars. You know, many Americans feel poorer and more polarized than ever before. Many of them don't believe that Biden's promises ever materialized. And not only that, some feel betrayed that while he ran as a transitional president, he made no effort to actually pass the baton in a timely fashion.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
That is the CBC's Chris Reyes in New York. And one of the most read stories at cbcnews.ca is about the Premier's meeting ahead of incoming President Donald Trump's promise of that 25% tariff. That story is at cbcnews.ca on our main page, one of the most read. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime. cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM. It's a little slick out there, especially on the perimeter, but we're going to be mild temperature-wise. Let's find out what's coming up on this half hour of our show on your Wednesday morning. Yesterday, the big new strategy to tackle homelessness was announced by the province. Speaking of Premier Wab Kinew, who's at that meeting they were just referring to. But yesterday he was here giving us some details of what this is going to look like. So the goal is to move people out of encampments and into safe housing. We're going to talk to the person who's been tasked with being in charge of implementing the strategy to end chronic homelessness by 2031. It's a lofty goal. It's a big plan. We're going to walk through it and talk about the details. We also, in advance of that, are going to hear from people in Winnipeg who are experiencing homelessness. They're living houseless right now on the city streets. They're going to weigh in on the strategy. First, though, let's go to Heather Wells for details on other stories that are developing this morning. Hi, Heather.
Good morning. Well, a national Muslim advocacy group wants an apology from one of the candidates who wants to lead Manitoba's Progressive Conservative Party. The National Council of Canadian Muslims says it is dismayed. Wally Dowdrich's campaign shared a Facebook post that ended with the statement, quote, "We must stop Muslim Abi Khan from becoming Conservative leader." Khan, the MLA for Fort White, is Dowdrich's rival in this campaign, and the council says this kind of post is unacceptable. People in Dominion City, south of Winnipeg, are shocked after a man was shot and killed by RCMP. It happened early yesterday in the town of about 300 people. We're going to take you to Dominion City, where we will hear from the Reeve of the Arm of Franklin coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Lots of developing news this morning. All right. So we also have had a lot of calls on the commuter line, and this is going to relate to weather because the winds are making everything slick as we continue to remind people this morning, Abby.
Yes, -9 now in the city. We're seeing light snow grains gently falling. This snow and gusty winds should pack their bags and clear out this morning as you get into your day, making way for a mix of sun and clouds. Though it's going to be windy at some point, but by mid-morning, the winds will be picking up more speed. We'll see highs around +2 for Winnipeg today. And then for tonight, partly cloudy skies will stick around. There's a slight chance of flurries into the late evening and overnight, though the windy conditions will still be present. And in other regions, we're seeing snow tapering off with windy conditions. Brandon is seeing drifting snow at this time, expecting a mix of sun and clouds. Similar conditions in the Interlake region, snow clearing, sunny day with light winds. And then the further north you go, you're going to see snow, about 2 to 4 centimeters expected. Northwest winds will be coming with that. And of course, we're seeing some blowing snow in the forecast for the Churchill region. In summary, the snow is stepping aside this morning, giving the spotlight to some sunny breaks and breezy conditions, and the highs would get to +2 today.
I like how you framed it.
Stepping aside.
Packing their bag, packing its bags.
Pack its bags, step aside.
What does the weather system put in its bag, I wonder, as it moves on?
It's just going to give spotlight to the sunny conditions, but also don't forget, the roads are going to be slippery.
Yeah, so let's go to May for that. You've been busy this morning, eh?
They really are. I've gotten so many calls, and all of the listeners are saying they're so slippery. So watch yourselves around those intersections. Brake early if you can. I'll let you know about a few areas in the city of Winnipeg here, northbound Kenniston, just north of Grant. There's a car in the curb lane, so that's expected to slow things down. As well, just an update on the collision at Nairn and Gray. That's cleared. It should be good to move through. And looking at the perimeter now, we've gotten a lot of calls about the perimeter. Lots of slippery conditions, particularly on the bridges and the exits off the perimeter, particularly westbound north perimeter. Turning south onto Brookside Boulevard, there's a collision on the bridge. It's been there for a while now. I just got a call from Cody, who called us to let us know that it's still there. It's backed up more than a kilometer. Also looking at west perimeter, driving northbound, there's a fender bender at the train tracks at Oak Bluff. Very slippery in that area as well. And then just looking at our highways outside of the city, across the province, northeast outside of Winnipeg, is a lot of reduced visibility because of the blowing conditions. And similar thing if you go southwest outside of Winnipeg, all the way into Brandon and west out of our province. So please take care on those highways. Slow your brakes early if you can. I think that's my message of the day. Anything you're seeing out there, please give me a call and I'll let everyone know. 204-788-3093.
So we got the details. We've been talking about this coming for a while. The Your Way Home strategy announced by the NDP government yesterday. The goal is to dismantle encampments one by one. That's one of the goals. But really, this is obviously to start moving people into housing and end chronic homelessness. So the province is in the process right now of purchasing and renovating apartment buildings that will add 300 new social units with support services. This is a wraparound services with a goal to help people not just get a roof over their head, but to really improve their lives and move forward. CBC's Jim Agapito and Jason Empson were out yesterday after the strategy was announced. They spoke to some people who are experiencing homelessness about some of the details of the strategy.
Jesse Winberg. What would it take for you to try and find, to want to leave an encampment or some shelter? What would you need?
I guess more supports on my behalf. So to get, motivation, and try to get into a stable environment, so away from drugs.
Is there enough social programs or whatnot helping you to do that currently right now?
No, because there's no funding in the programs that we need to have those requirements.
Do you feel safe being out on the streets right now?
Well, yeah and no, because it's cold, because you freeze to death, right? Because it's minus 40 out. But yeah, it's safe on the streets in certain areas. I would say certain types, I guess, because gangs, right? Certain gangs in different areas. Yeah, I think it's safe.
How about in encampments? Is it safe at encampments?
I think it's okay at encampments. They don't really do much down there. They're mostly there trying to survive, right? If there was more buildings available for rent and all that, and if they had more apartments for the homeless, it would be a lot easier on the cops and all that, for the crime rate and stuff like that. Yeah.
Catherine Smith Sutherland.
Where are you currently living right now, Catherine?
I'm homeless. I've been homeless for 3 to 4 years, about 4th year. Yeah.
Have you ever lived in any encampments and whatnot?
Yeah, I used to live at the waterfront. I used to live up in Chief Peguis, and I used to live at St. Anne's and Fermor.
Today's really cold. How do you stay warm?
Well, this year I've been staying in the shelters. I just go back and forth to shelters sometimes.
Where do you feel most safe? Is it on at the shelters and on the streets, being by yourself? Where is it?
I usually like camping by myself just because it's just kind of hard with a lot of people living in a place at once. Like it takes a while to get used to because I've usually had a place of my own. Like I got homeless because I lost my job. I'm actually a level 2 electrician. And I lost my job, and then I couldn't pay for rent, so I lost my apartment, and so it got me here. So,
for people who don't know what it's like to be living on the streets, being homeless right now in the cold, what would you say to them?
That I have no idea because it's their choice, right? If they want to live like this, it's really hard though. Well, it's been hard for me for 3-4 years because I haven't been on welfare, but I got on welfare. But I've been just binning to get my money for stuff like weed and smokes and stuff like that. I would really like some housing, but for the time being, I'll just stick on the streets because I just walk around and kill time, but I don't have the inhibition to seek for houses and stuff.
Can I ask why that is?
It just takes too much time out of my day. I feel like I have to do other things than look for a house. It's not on my top priority list because I got other places I could go for right now, right? But, yeah.
Where are some of the places that you could go then to find shelter, especially during this time?
Siloam Mission, 190, and Main Street Projects, homeless shelters I go to.
CBC's Jim Agapito yesterday talking to some people who are experiencing homelessness in Winnipeg. So the province has said the encampments will only be decommissioned once move-in ready housing is secured for every person. And they also have said by 2031 they hope to end chronic homelessness altogether. Tessa Blakey-Whitecloud is CEO of Siloam Mission, but not for long. She was just hired by the province to be the new Premier's senior advisor on ending chronic homelessness. She's been listening and she's in studio this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
A big task. Obviously, you were listening to some of these stories. You've heard them in your role at Siloam and also, in other places over the years. Mm-hmm. What stood out from you from that we just heard from people that will match up with the plan that you feel, you'll be meeting needs?
Yeah, so two pieces that I want to point out. So the first is that first individual talks about the housing has to have the right supports. The housing has to be the right kind of environment. It has to be funded adequately. It has to be a solution that actually works for him to pursue that housing, and that there is that need for more units. And this plan commits to 300 units specifically to address encampments, but also is on top of a $116 million investment in social housing. So we're not talking about just 300 units and we think that's going to solve homelessness. We're talking about a holistic all-of-government approach. And then secondly, when we're talking with that woman, I think one of the things that's really important, what she's saying, is that right now it does take a lot of time to look for housing because there isn't any. And so you're looking for a needle in a haystack. Yesterday at the press conference, I mentioned that, every month we have about 100 units that are deeply affordable come available in our city. And we have about 3,500 people competing for those units. So honestly, why bother? I get where she's coming from. And so part of the work here is that these 300 units are going to be dedicated to supporting folks who are living unsheltered, while we're simultaneously still making that investment to create more social housing units in general.
I have to key in right away on some of the things that to me look like they could be some of the challenges with the plan, because it involves a lot of moving. So you've got to go in and talk to people who are in encampments and you're moving them somewhere else. So that's the individual human thing. But then you're moving people out of Manitoba housing units right now as well as part of the plan to free up room there. People who would be, eligible and maybe supported and would be deemed to be able to find success moving on to a different rental situation in Manitoba. But how do you even begin to approach that? Because you're basically coming in saying, I know you've lived here, but we're going to try to help you to move somewhere else.
Yeah, so I think this is a two-part question, right? And yesterday was really a three-part announcement. So one of the pieces of the announcement was the encampment response strategy, which says, we're going to work with outreach teams that already have relationships with encampments to say, we're bringing 300 units online, 40 of them are already ready, dedicated to looking at this particular population. outreach teams. Who do you know that's keen and ready for housing? And how do we work on an encampment to encampment approach in that respect?
So that's some of the first steps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Right. It's and I think, it's working with the sector. It's working with people who have the relationships of outreach. So it's not, going to be a brand new person walking into an encampment and saying in 30 days, we're going to find you ID and housing. It's, hey, what do those relationships look like? And I think that's what the government knew in wanting to launch this plan, is that we needed somebody from the sector to help collaborate with the sector so that there is that clear channel between government and the sector. And moving forward, I'll be able to be that channel to say, okay, here's the housing units that we're bringing online. We've been crying for housing units. 300 are coming right now. There's also that giant investment in social housing. What does it look like to start moving folks from encampments? Who's ready? What supports do they need? What do the supports need to look like?
Just before we move to part B, which is moving the people out of Manitoba housing to free up those units, what do you do on the ground when somebody says, I don't want to move? You and I have had conversation before about some people are choosing to live in encampments for various reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's not only that they're going to be helped to move, but also those encampments are going to be decommissioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you handle that challenge?
So I think a big piece of it is that in the past, we haven't had the housing to offer people, number one, right? So the idea of going to an encampment and saying, hey, y'all need to get into some housing, let's work on that together, has sort of been a pipe dream. But this plan starts with housing. And not only does it start with housing, but it starts with what does the same question actually that your reporter asked, what would it need to look like for you to move into housing? Well, that housing would have to be supportive. That housing would have to help me with my addiction. That housing would have to, all of those things. So it's working on what does the housing need to look like to become the most attractive option? And then how do we work on, as we bring more and more units online, 300 is that initial, the commitment made, yesterday. How do we make sure that those units are going to meet the needs of folks in encampments so that it is something that they want to take on?
What encampment will you start with? Because the first one we approached in February.
So we haven't sat down with outreach teams yet to talk through what makes the most sense, and also the work that is being. So as I mentioned, there's 40 units ready, but a lot of the other units are coming online with nonprofit partners. So there's going to be 2LGBTQ specific housing. There's going to be Indigenous women specific housing. There's going to be a variety of housing, and so we're going to need to, as those units come online, again work with the sector, work with outreach partners, and say, okay, who fits where, who's going to find that attractive. So I don't know that yet.
Okay, so if you're doing that work. I know I'm quoting from the strategy. It says, we also want to work with Manitoba Housing to identify tenants best positioned to succeed outside of that, connect them with rent supports and subsidies to move on to the next level. That's what I was referring to free up those spaces. Is that also you doing that work or a connection? How are those folks being identified?
Yeah, and so I think that's going to be working with Manitoba Housing to say, who's got a solid rental history, who's been really stable. Manitoba Housing is rent geared to income, so people's income, can fluctuate. And then we can figure out, who's kind of already ready maybe to move on. It will be about making sure that those rent subsidies are there. It will be about making sure that there is support so that if something does fall apart in the first little while, there's a way to make sure that doesn't lead to homelessness for somebody. But there's a lot of drive, right? Like there's a lot of people across sectors, and so including the private rental market, larger companies who are like, we want to be a part of the solution too. And so there are maybe a whole bunch of their units in their portfolio that they're willing to give up to a strategy like this to make sure that we can do the right thing by our neighbors in Winnipeg who are currently experiencing life on the street.
What's the plan if someone refuses support or doesn't want to be moved, either from an encampment or from their apartment?
Yeah, so this is a person-centered approach, right? We're going to lead with compassion. So the first question there is, okay, why? What does that look like? What's happened? How do we work through that in a way that makes sense for you? How do we work through that in a way that makes sense for the broader strategy? So it is still going to be person-centered, and a key part of that is that flex funding that was also announced. So like I've watched flex funding change lives. I've been a huge advocate for flex funding for a long time. We've never had it until this government.
What does it mean? Because listeners might not know what that means.
Totally. It means that like somebody shows up today trying to access shelter and we say, okay, well, what happened? How did your housing fall apart? Well, like my car broke down and I couldn't get it fixed, so I couldn't get to my job. Okay. Would your employer take you back if your car was fixed? Yes. Okay. Would your landlord take you back if we paid your arrears? Oh, okay. All of a sudden you're not experiencing homelessness, right?
So you have flexibility to use the funding in a very targeted way.
Yeah, and based on what that individual is presenting with. So, another story of flex funding, we had somebody who, in an experience of psychosis because of a med challenge that they experienced, hitchhiked from across the country and ended up in Winnipeg. But they had a psychiatrist and supportive housing in their city of origin. And so we contacted the psychiatrist, we contacted the supportive housing. We said, is this true? Are you ready to receive this individual? Absolutely, yes, please. Right?
Is the plan overly ambitious? I'm being careful with my language here because it's this is welcomed by many, but is it overly ambitious when it comes to the wraparound supports that we'll be able to offer people given the challenges we already have with things like mental health and addiction supports right now?
Yeah, so this is wraparound services that are in the housing, right? And so on top of that, there's going to be that investment. We already know 100 more mental health workers coming online. So this particular investment is about wraparound supports in those units. And I can tell you from the outside a little bit, putting back my Siloam hat back on for a moment, we're one of the people, one of the organizations that's going to be creating this. And we got our full ask on what we felt those supports needed to look like. So the government is saying, okay, what does it need to look like to house people well? And now it's about building up the team and building up the capacity to take that on.
24/7 supports, it says in the plan. I know that from some of our reporting, the numbers that are needed for this, I mean, for one person to have wraparound support, in one of our reporting, it said the number was $50,000, and I think it was 2 support workers per one person, and that may be off. But are you confident that this system will be able to come up to capacity that quickly to properly support people?
So again, I think what's interesting is that this is a 30-day by encampment plan. This isn't 30 days for all encampments, right? So the realism is built into the plan. We're going to work with folks in encampments. We're going to work with outreach providers who already have the relationships to understand who's ready as we bring units online. Those units are going to be tailored to specific populations and led by nonprofits that are already working with those community members to say, okay, what does that need to look like? And then we're going to move on to the next one. So it's going to be a slow build. We're not saying that this plan is going to solve anything overnight. It took us a long time to get here. Almost my entire life, we have been divesting from social housing as a nation, and we have been divesting from social housing as a province, unfortunately, for the last 7.5 years. So it's going to be a long-term solution.
I have to ask as a last question, Tessa. People might wonder where End Homelessness Winnipeg is in all of this, because we've had multiple plans from that group over the years. They've been the overarching face of the organization tasked with ending it, distributing funds to Ottawa's Reaching Home strategy. How do they fit into the government's plan? I saw no mention of them.
Yeah, so it'll be really important that they continue to do the work that they're doing, administering Reaching Home funds and being supporting coordinated access and all of that. I really look forward to, Jason and I have spoken at least twice already this week. He's the CEO there. So really look forward to collaborating with End Homelessness Winnipeg to ensure that as the provincial government says, we want to step up and take a more coordinated approach, specifically on encampments. So the coordinated access system is the first time you enter into that system, you're prioritized based on your level of need. And that system will continue. And so that will support folks that are currently in shelters, that have a caseworker.
So this plan doesn't necessarily replace everything we've heard about the plans that have already been in place.
No, this is a plan. So there's 2 pieces to the plan, right? There's the long-term vision to end homelessness in our province, and the short-term piece that says we want to deal with folks that are living unsheltered now. They deserve our help now.
The news department is waiting to go on air here. Thank you for all of your time. We'll talk again.
Absolutely.
Tessa Blakey-Whitecloud, the CEO of Siloam Mission, and just the newly announced advisor to the Premier's senior advisor on ending chronic homelessness. It is 8:31 now. We're a little bit late getting to your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. It is -9 as that temperature just keeps on climbing. We're headed to a high today of 2. It is going to be windy south, gusting to 50 through the day. A national Muslim advocacy group wants an apology from one of the candidates vying to lead Manitoba's Progressive Conservative Party. The National Council of Canadian Muslims says it is dismayed. Wally Dowdrich's campaign shared a Facebook post ending with the statement, "We must stop Muslim Abi Khan from becoming Conservative leader." Khan is the MLA for Fort White and Dowdrich's rival in this leadership contest. Sadaf Ahmed speaks for the National Council in Manitoba.
We find Mr. Doddridge's repost highly irresponsible and divisive, and we have reached out to him, and we find it unacceptable.
Dowdrich's campaign says the repost was only up for 4 days. His campaign manager says it was deleted as soon as it was flagged. The PC Leadership Election Committee says Dowdrich must commit to making the party open to all religions. The incoming Trump administration is top of the agenda at the First Ministers meeting today in Ottawa. Premier Rob Canoe and other premiers will sit down with the Prime Minister. They hope to formulate a response to possible U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods. Canoe says his priorities are the cost of living, military spending, and jobs.
Well, I hope that we have a unified Team Canada approach, responding to Inauguration Day next week in the U.S. and then whatever we see come forward after that. I know for us, though, in Manitoba, it's about jobs.
Canoe says he is also focused on Canada meeting its military spending targets. A housing advocate says Manitoba's plan to end homelessness may force some people out of their homes. A plan unveiled yesterday calls for people to be moved from homeless encampments into social housing. Spaces would be freed up by convincing better-off Manitoba housing tenants to move into the private market with rent supports. Professor Shauna McKinnon works in the Department of Urban and Inner City Studies at the University of Winnipeg.
Now, we're talking about people who are in public housing that they're suggesting may not need all the support, so we're going to move them out. Have we talked to these people whether or not they'd like to move out? They're people's homes. So I don't know. I find it really problematic, and it seems like a lot more work needs to be done to focus on the issue at hand, which is we need more housing.
The province says it is in the process of adding 300 new social units with support services. Well, people in Dominion City, south of Winnipeg, are shocked after a man was shot and killed by RCMP. It happened yesterday in the town of about 300. Police say an officer shot a 33-year-old man who was armed with a metal object and refused to drop it. Dave Carlson is the Reeve in the Arm of Franklin, which includes Dominion City.
It's very unfortunate. I think everyone's shocked and somewhat distressed by it. Definitely something you don't want to see, especially in a community the size of the city. It's not very big, and they say most people know each other, and it's just not a good scene.
Carlson says he doesn't recall a shooting ever in the community. Manitoba's police watchdog is investigating. A program to help international students at the University of Winnipeg improve their English skills is coming to an end. The U of W announced it is cutting its English language program along with the university's women's soccer team. The school says it's facing significant financial challenges. It says enrollment in the language program is down due to international student caps imposed by the federal government. Asher Jiao is a University of Winnipeg collegiate student. He learned English before moving here with his family from China.
I totally understand at this core it's still a business and money is important, but I've personally helped a lot of international students, and I don't see the reason why they're cutting down this program entirely. Our teachers are very dedicated. I'm sure there's an alternative to this problem right now, and it's really heartbreaking to see the support being taken away from these students who need it the most.
The U of W says the program is no longer financially viable due to the dropping enrollment. And Mark Carney will officially launch his bid for the Liberal leadership tomorrow in Edmonton. Calgary Liberal MP George Chahal is sending out invitations to Alberta Liberals and says he will support Carney. The former Bank of Canada governor was born in the Northwest Territories and was raised in Edmonton. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from our news department with Joni Nicolo and Megan Ketcherson as well. Also, thanks to our leaders in unit, Nellie Gonzalez, who's the show's producer in Current Affairs, and the senior producer of audio at CBC Manitoba is Leif Larson. Those who contributed to today's show items on Information Radio, associate producers Issa Kixon, Chidi Akuma, and Kalkadan Mulugeta. Big thanks to our live team, Kevin Ipatebo, as well as Abby Adiyemi and May McKillop. With the last word on the commute, here is May.
Quick update, Keniston approaching Corridon. There's a stalled vehicle in the northbound curb lane. As well, we're looking at extremely slippery conditions along the perimeters and highways, particularly on North Perimeter, westbound turning south onto Brookside Boulevard. There's a collision on the bridge. It's still happening. Drive safe.
Abby.
The snow steps aside this morning and the gusty winds will be easing off throughout the day. Expect a mix of sun and clouds, varying temperatures from frigid north to milder south. We're looking at +2 for Winnipeg.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening this Wednesday morning. The mayor's here tomorrow for our monthly interview and, of course, more local programming through the day on Radio Noon and Up to Speed. Take care. Be well, Manitoba. My name's Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC.